My daughter-in-law slipped a white powder into my wine glass on Christmas Eve to humiliate me. She wanted me gone, but she did not know my son was watching. He did not say a word. He just switched the glasses. 20 minutes later, as she ran to the bathroom heaving, my son leaned in and whispered 6 words that changed everything. Wait until I expose the truth tomorrow. If you are watching this, hit like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever had to protect yourself from your own family. I sat in the corner of the room in a wingback chair that likely cost more than my first 3 cars combined. The air inside the mansion smelled of fresh pine needles, expensive perfume, and the kind of money that likes to shout. My son Marcus has done well for himself. A sprawling estate in the suburbs of Atlanta with marble floors that echoed when you walked and a Christmas tree that touched the 20-foot ceiling. But to his wife Tiffany and her parents, the Worthingtons, I was just a stain on their perfect holiday picture. I am Otis Jenkins, 73 years old. To them, I am just Pops, the retired truck driver who lives in a small, drafty house on the south side of the city. They think my hands are rough because I am uneducated. They think I wear this same charcoal suit to every event because I cannot afford another one. They do not know this suit is a bespoke piece from Savile Row tailored 30 years ago when I was closing deals that built the logistics infrastructure for half the East Coast. Quality lasts, just like dignity. But I have never told them about the money. I never told Marcus about the real extent of my assets or the 30% stake I still hold in the shipping union. I wanted my son to build his own kingdom, not just inherit mine. Tonight, however, my silence felt heavy. Tiffany walked by me carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She did not offer me one. She stopped just close enough for me to smell the alcohol on her breath. She adjusted the garland on the mantel and spoke loud enough for her mother Karen to hear. Marcus really should have booked him a hotel room, she said, her voice sharp and nasal. He looks like he just walked off a construction site. It ruins the aesthetic of the party. The mayor is coming tonight, Mom. We cannot have him sitting here looking like a charity case. I said nothing. I just adjusted my pocket square and looked at the fire. I learned a long time ago that silence is the loudest noise you can make in a room full of fools. But inside, my blood was beginning to boil. It wasn't just the insults, it was the way she looked at me. Like I was something she needed to scrape off her shoe. I watched Marcus across the room. He was talking to some business partners, laughing, holding a drink. He looked tired. His eyes were tight at the corners. For months I had thought he was weak. I thought he let this woman walk all over him, cut him off from his roots, and turn him into someone I did not raise. I thought he was blind to her wickedness. It broke my heart to see my boy, a strong black man who graduated top of his class from Howard, reduced to a prop in Tiffany's social climbing reality show. It was time for the toast, the main event before the dinner service. Tiffany went to the bar cart in the corner. I watched her from my chair. She was agitated. She kept glancing at me, then at the clock. Her mother Karen whispered something to her and pointed at me. I saw Tiffany nod. A look of dark determination crossed her face. She grabbed a bottle of expensive vintage Cabernet. She poured 2 glasses, one for her, one for me. She positioned her body to block the view of the guests, but from my angle in the corner I had a clear line of sight. I saw her hand hover over the glass intended for me. I saw the quick pinch of her fingers. A fine white dust settled onto the dark red liquid. It dissolved instantly. She swirled the glass. She glanced at her mother Karen across the room and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I knew exactly what this was. I had overheard them 3 weeks ago when I came by to drop off a birthday gift for Marcus. They didn't know I was in the hallway. They were talking about the nursing home, not a nice facility. The state-run facility downtown, the one with the overcrowding issues and the smell of bleach and despair. They needed a reason to put me there, a medical episode, an outburst, a sign that old Otis was losing his mind and becoming a danger to himself or others. That powder wasn't poison to kill me. It was something to make me sick, confused, maybe lose control of my bowels or my temper in front of the mayor. I tensed up, gripping the armrests of the chair. My plan was simple. I would wait for her to hand me the glass, and then I would accidentally knock it over. I would ruin her Persian rug rather than drink her toxicity. But then I saw him. Marcus. He was standing by the grand fireplace about 10 feet away from the bar cart. He wasn't looking at Tiffany directly. He was looking into the large gilt-framed mirror that hung above the mantel. The angle was perfect. He saw exactly what I saw. He saw his wife drug his father's drink. I watched my son's face. I expected shock. I expected him to storm over and grab her hand. I expected a scene. But Marcus didn't move a muscle. His face didn't show surprise. It showed a cold, hard recognition. His jaw tightened until I could see the muscle feathering in his cheek. Just then, the doorbell rang. A hush fell over the room. The mayor had arrived. Tiffany squealed a high-pitched sound of fake delight. She abandoned the drinks on the cart and ran to the foyer to greet the VIP, smoothing her dress and fixing her hair. The moment she turned her back, Marcus moved. He didn't run. He didn't look frantic. He walked with the smooth, deadly precision of a predator stalking prey. He crossed the space to the bar cart in 3 long strides. He didn't look at me. He didn't look around. In one fluid motion, he took the glass intended for me, the one with the powder, and placed it on her coaster. He took her glass, the clean one, and placed it on the napkin meant for me. He paused for a fraction of a second. He looked at me across the room. His eyes were dark pools unreadable to anyone who didn't know him. But I am his father. I saw the rage burning deep down, buried under layers of patience. He gave me the slightest nod. Then he walked away, picking up a tray of appetizers just as Tiffany came back into the room with the mayor on her arm. My heart hammered against my ribs. My son knew. He knew what she was. And he had just made a move on the chessboard. Tiffany came back beaming, basking in the attention of the city's elite. She walked over to the bar cart. She didn't notice a thing. Why would she? She thought Marcus was the oblivious husband and I was the senile old man. Arrogance is always the downfall of the wicked. She picked up the glasses. She walked over to me with a smile that was all teeth and malice. "Here, Pop," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that made my stomach turn. "A special vintage, just for you. Marcus said you love Cabernet. Drink up. It will help you relax before dinner." I looked at the glass. Then I looked at her. She was wearing a diamond necklace that I knew Marcus had bought by maxing out his business line of credit because she demanded it. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said, keeping my voice steady, playing the part of the grateful, humble elder. "You are too kind to an old man." She took her own glass, the one that was originally mine, the one she had tainted with her own hands. To family, she announced, raising her glass to the room, making sure the mayor was watching her benevolence toward her poor father-in-law. To family, I echoed. We drank. She drained hers to the last drop, eager to get back to the party. I sipped mine slowly. It was excellent wine, smooth, oaky, expensive, and completely safe. I watched her work the room. She was laughing, touching people's arms, flipping her hair. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The conversation in the room was lively. The fireplace crackled. But I kept my eyes on Tiffany. It started subtly. She stopped laughing mid-sentence. A frown creased her forehead. She touched her stomach. Her skin, usually flushed with makeup, and excitement began to turn the color of old paper. Sweat beaded on her upper lip. She looked across the room at her mother, Karen. Her eyes were wide and terrified. She swayed on her feet, grabbing the back of a sofa for support. "Excuse me," she stammered to the mayor. "I need to—" She didn't finish the sentence. She clamped a hand over her mouth. Her cheeks puffed out. She sprinted toward the powder room, her heels clicking frantically on the marble. She barely made it through the door before the sound of her retching echoed down the hallway. It was loud, violent, unladylike. The room went silent. The music seemed to stop. Karen rushed after her daughter, shouting something about food poisoning and bad shrimp. I sat there, swirling my wine, watching the chaos unfold. A small smile touched my lips. Marcus walked over to me. He didn't look worried about his wife. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked like a man who had just laid down a winning hand of poker. He sat on the arm of my chair, his back to the guests. He leaned down so his lips were right by my ear. The smell of his cologne reminded me of the day I taught him to tie his first tie. "Dad." He whispered, his voice low and rough. I saw what she did. I swapped them. I looked up at him. "Keep playing the confused old man for tonight," he continued. "Let her think it was just a mistake or bad luck, but don't go anywhere. Wait until tomorrow morning." "Why tomorrow?" I asked. "Because tomorrow is Christmas," he said, "and I'm going to give you a show you will never forget. She thinks she runs this house. She thinks she owns me. But I have been gathering evidence for 2 years. Tomorrow everyone finds out who Tiffany really is." He squeezed my shoulder, his grip strong and reassuring. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I had spent so much time worrying that I had lost him, that he had forgotten where he came from. I was wrong. He hadn't forgotten. He was just biding his time. He was a Jenkins. and a Jenkins always pays his debts. The sound of Tiffany being sick continued from the bathroom. It was music to my ears. But according to Marcus, this was just the overture. The real symphony was about to begin. The mayor did not stay for dinner. Nobody did. The sound of Tiffany retching in the guest bathroom was loud enough to drown out the Christmas carols playing over the surround sound system. It was a violent, guttural noise that echoed off the expensive marble floors and signaled the end of the evening. I sat still in my wingback chair and watched the social elite of Atlanta scatter like roaches when the kitchen light turns on. They grabbed their coats and muttered vague excuses about early mornings and babysitters fleeing the stench of disaster. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for family. That was when the real show began. Karen Worthington, Tiffany's mother, was a woman who wore her jewelry like armor and her prejudices like a second skin. She stood outside the bathroom door, wringing her hands, her face a mask of performative horror. When the paramedics finally arrived and wheeled a pale, sweating Tiffany out on a stretcher, Karen turned her eyes on me. They were cold, hard eyes, the kind that had looked through me for 5 years. She marched across the room, her heels clicking aggressively. She stopped inches from my chair. She pointed a manicured finger in my face. "This is your fault," she hissed. Her voice was trembling with rage. "You brought this into our house. You and your street germs. You probably touched the appetizers with those dirty hands." "My daughter is delicate. She is not used to the kind of bacteria people like you live with." I looked at her finger. Then I looked at her face. I said nothing. I wanted to tell her that my hands were cleaner than her soul. I wanted to tell her that I scrubbed my hands with surgical precision because that is what a man does when he builds things for a living. But I remembered Marcus's whisper. Wait until tomorrow. So I just stared at her, letting her racism hang in the air like a bad smell. Marcus stepped between us. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man handling a difficult client. "Karen." "That is enough," he said. His voice was flat. "Pops hasn't moved from that chair in an hour. He didn't touch the food. Go with Tiffany in the ambulance. I will drive Pops and meet you there." She huffed, adjusting her fur coat, and stormed out the door without looking back. The ride to the hospital was silent. Marcus drove his black SUV with a steady hand. I sat in the passenger seat watching the city lights blur past. My mind drifted back. I couldn't help it. Seeing Tiffany wheeled out on that stretcher playing the victim triggered a memory I tried to bury. It was 3 years ago, the day my wife Betty died. We were in the hospice wing. Betty had fought cancer for 2 years, but she was tired. She had slipped away peacefully in her sleep around 3 in the afternoon. I was sitting by her bedside, holding her hand, trying to memorize the lines of her face before the undertaker came. I was shattered. My world had just ended. The door had opened. I thought it was the nurse. It was Tiffany. She walked in wearing a bright yellow dress that looked like a slap in the face of mourning. She didn't look at Betty. She didn't look at me. She looked around the room as if checking the amenities. "Is she gone?" she asked. I nodded, unable to speak. She didn't offer a hug. She didn't offer a tissue. She walked over to the foot of the bed and sighed. "Well, at least the medical bills stop now," she said. I looked up at her, stunned. "Did she have life insurance?" "Pops?" she asked, checking her watch. "Marcus said she had a policy from her teaching days. Do you know how much it is? We really need to redo the kitchen in the new house, and it would be a shame if that money got tied up in probate." I remember the coldness that spread through my chest that day. It was colder than death. In that moment, holding my dead wife's hand, I realized that Tiffany was not just selfish. She was hollow. She was a creature of consumption, eating everything in her path. I kicked her out of the room that day. I never told Marcus what she said. I didn't want to poison his marriage. I thought maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was grief talking. But tonight, as we pulled into the emergency room bay, I knew I hadn't misunderstood a thing. She was a predator, and tonight she had tried to make me her prey. We walked into the ER waiting room. It was chaotic, but Karen waved us over. They had already been seen. A doctor was coming out of a private room. I recognized him. Dr. Pierce. He was a regular at Tiffany's cocktail parties. A man with a weak chin and a wandering eye who laughed too hard at Tiffany's jokes. He walked up to us looking grave. He held a clipboard against his chest. "Marcus." "I am glad you are here," Dr. Pierce said. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. His eyes were shifting. He looked nervous. "How is she?" Marcus asked. "She is stable," Dr. Pierce said. "We are flushing her system. But Marcus, we found traces of a sedative in her stomach contents. A strong one." He paused for dramatic effect. Karen let out a sob that sounded like a dying cat. "Tiffany says she saw your father near her drink." Dr. Pierce continued, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "She thinks he might be confused. Maybe he mixed up his own medication. Or maybe... Well, with dementia, sometimes patients do things they don't understand. We might need to involve adult protective services. For his own safety and for yours." I felt the trap snap shut. This was it. This was the end game. They had the doctor. They had the narrative. They were going to paint me as a senile, dangerous old man who tried to drug his daughter-in-law. It was the perfect excuse to lock me away and seize control of my assets. Tiffany had drugged the wine, and now she was blaming me for the poison she intended for my throat. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to roar at this injustice. But Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He stepped forward, towering over the doctor. He didn't look like the passive husband anymore. He looked like the man who built a tech startup from a garage into a multi-million-dollar empire. Dr. Pierce Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk but sharp as a razor. "That is a very interesting diagnosis, especially since my father takes no medication. None. His annual physical was last week. He is as clean as a whistle." The doctor blinked. "Well, perhaps he found something," and Marcus interrupted, stepping closer, invading the doctor's personal space. "I find it fascinating that you think he drugged her drink, because I have been with my father all night. However, I did notice something strange." Marcus pulled his phone out of his pocket. He didn't show them a video. He just held it in his hand, a black rectangle of potential destruction. "I noticed that Tiffany was the one pouring the drinks." Marcus lied, smoothly, effortlessly. He was weaving a story to confuse them to buy time. "And I noticed she was taking those diet pills she buys online from Mexico. The ones you warned her about last month, Pierce. The ones that cause nausea and hallucinations if mixed with alcohol." Dr. Pierce froze. He hadn't warned her about anything, but he knew Tiffany took questionable supplements. He also knew that if he pushed a false accusation of poisoning against me and was proven wrong, his medical license would be on the line. Marcus was offering him an out, a way to blame the victim without incriminating her. "Oh," the doctor stammered. "The diet pills. Yes, that would explain the rapid onset. The interaction with the tannins in the wine. Yes." Karen stopped crying. She looked from the doctor to Marcus. She knew it was a lie. She knew Tiffany didn't take diet pills. But she couldn't say no. She actually tried to drug Otis without admitting the crime. She was cornered. "So it was an accident then," Marcus said firmly. "A bad reaction to supplements. No need for police. No need for adult protective services. Just a foolish mistake by my wife." Dr. Pierce nodded vigorously. "Exactly. An accident. We will keep her overnight for observation, just to be safe." Marcus turned to me. He put his hand on my back. "Let's go, Dad. It has been a long night. We will come back in the morning to pick her up." We walked out of the hospital into the cold night air. The sliding doors hissed shut behind us, cutting off the antiseptic smell of the ER. We walked to the car in silence. But this time the silence was different. It wasn't heavy. It was shared. It was the silence of two soldiers in a foxhole. When we got into the truck, Marcus didn't start the engine immediately. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He took a deep breath, and when he let it out, he shuddered. "I knew, Dad," he said. He didn't look at me. He stared out the windshield at the brick wall of the hospital. "I knew about Mom, about what Tiffany said to you when she died." I turned to him, shocked. "You knew?" "I heard the nurses talking about it later," he said quietly. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was gossip. But deep down, I knew. And I knew about the money she stole from the business account last year. I knew about the way she talks to you when I am not in the room. Then why, I asked. My voice was thick with emotion. "Why did you stay? Why did you let this happen?" "Because I needed to be sure," he said. He turned to look at me and his eyes were fierce. Not just sure that she was greedy. I needed to be sure she was dangerous. I needed proof that would stand up in court. If I divorced her last year, she would have taken half the company. She would have taken the house. She would have destroyed everything I built for our future children. I needed her to cross the line. He clenched his fist. Tonight she crossed it. She tried to hurt you, Dad. She tried to put you away. And now, I have everything I need. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, sleek device. A flash drive. The security cameras in the living room are high-definition 4K with audio, he said. I installed them 3 months ago. I have footage of her putting the powder in the glass. I have footage of her whispering to Karen. I have footage of the doctor lying. He put the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. Go home and get some sleep, Pops, he said. Tomorrow morning we are going to have a very different kind of Christmas. I have already called my lawyer. He is meeting us at the house at 9 a.m. I looked at my son. For the first time in years, I didn't see the boy who was trying too hard to fit into a world that didn't want him. I saw a man who had mastered his environment. He had played the long game. He had let them think he was weak, let them think he was blind, all while he was sharpening the blade. We drove home through the empty streets. The Christmas lights on the lampposts blurred into streaks of color. I thought about the white powder dissolving in the wine. I thought about the look on Tiffany's face when she realized she was sick. And then I thought about tomorrow. They wanted to break me. They wanted to take my dignity and my freedom. But they forgot one thing. I am Otis Jenkins, and I raised a wolf, not a sheep. Tomorrow, the sheep's clothing comes off. The next morning, Christmas Day, the sky was a sharp, brittle blue. The sun glittered on the fresh snow, but there was no warmth in it. I was in the kitchen brewing coffee, the black bitter kind I like, when the front door slammed open. Tiffany was back. She didn't look like someone who had spent the night in the hospital recovering from accidental poisoning. She looked like a hurricane in designer loungewear. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, but her eyes were red-rimmed and furious. Karen was right behind her, carrying Tiffany's overnight bag like a loyal soldier. I didn't turn around. I kept my back to them, watching the coffee drip into the carafe. "He is still here," Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracked raw from the night before. "I told you, Mom. I told you he did this on purpose." She marched into the kitchen. I turned slowly, holding my mug. I made sure my hand trembled just a little. "Good morning, Tiffany," I said, my voice soft. "I hope you are feeling better." She stopped a foot away from me. She smelled of hospital antiseptic and stale fear. "Don't you dare play the sweet old man with me," she spat. "I know what you did. You confused your medication with my drink. You are senile, Otis. You are a danger to this family." I blinked, feigning confusion. Medication. "But I don't take medication, Tiffany," Dr. Pierce said. "Dr. Pierce is an idiot," she cut me off. "And so is Marcus for believing him." "You are losing your mind. You tried to poison me in my own house." She grabbed the mug from my hand. Coffee sloshed onto my sleeve, burning my skin. I didn't flinch. I just looked at the brown stain spreading on my cuff. "Get out!" she screamed. She threw the mug into the sink. It shattered. "Get out of my kitchen. Get out of my sight." Karen stepped forward, her face pinched. "Tiffany is right, Mr. Jenkins. You are clearly not well. It is not safe for you to be around the family. Perhaps a hotel—" "No," Tiffany interrupted. "No hotel. Hotels cost money. Our money." She whirled around and stormed toward the guest room on the first floor where I had been staying. I followed slowly, my footsteps heavy on the hardwood. Marcus wasn't downstairs yet. He was likely in his office, or maybe he was upstairs listening, waiting. I reached the guest room door just as Tiffany emerged, her arms full of my clothes, my Savile Row suit, my shirts, my few personal items. She didn't hand them to me. She walked past me to the back door, kicked it open, and threw everything out onto the patio. My clothes landed in the snow. My suit jacket, carefully folded for decades, sprawled open like a dead bird. My shirt scattered. A pair of socks landed in a puddle of slush. "There," she said, panting slightly. "If you want to stay for Christmas, you can stay in the servants' quarters above the garage. That is where you belong, out of the main house, away from civilized people. The servants' quarters." It was a glorified storage room. No heating, no running water, just a dusty bed and boxes of Christmas decorations from 5 years ago. I looked at my clothes in the snow. Then I looked at her. "You are evicting me," I asked quietly, "on Christmas." "I am protecting my family," she sneered, "from a crazy old man who poisons people. Go pick up your trash, Otis, and be grateful I don't call the police." She slammed the door in my face. The lock clicked. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. Inside, I could hear her sobbing to her mother, a loud theatrical performance of victimhood. I turned and walked out into the cold. I bent down and picked up my jacket. It was wet and cold. I shook off the snow. I gathered my shirts, my socks, my dignity. I didn't rush. I didn't look angry. I moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who knows something the rest of the world doesn't. I walked to the garage. I didn't go up to the room. I stood in the shadow of the building, out of sight of the house windows. I pulled out my old flip phone. It was time. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. Rose, a voice answered. Crisp. Professional. It is time, I said. Mr. Jenkins Rosen said, his tone shifting instantly to one of respect. Merry Christmas. I assume you are calling about the situation. I looked at the main house. Through the kitchen window, I could see Tiffany pouring herself a glass of orange juice, laughing with her mother. She thought she had won. She thought she had banished the old man to the cold. Clause 66, I said. There was a pause on the line. Clause 66. The hostile takeover provision. Are you sure, sir? That is the nuclear option. I brushed a snowflake off my sleeve. Buy it, I said. Not just the building, the brand, the debt, everything. I want to own the air she breathes when she walks into that office tomorrow. Understood, Rosen said. I will have the papers drawn up within the hour. We will execute the purchase through the shell company. She won't know it is you until you want her to know. Do it, I said. And Rosen. Yes, sir. Make sure the eviction notice for her flagship store is ready for Monday morning. Consider it done. I hung up the phone. I looked up at the servants' quarters. It would be cold tonight. My bones would ache. But that was fine. The cold keeps you sharp. And I needed to be sharp. I climbed the rickety stairs to the room above the garage. It smelled of dust and old gasoline. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and folded my damp suit jacket over a chair. I could hear the faint sound of Christmas music coming from the main house. They were probably opening presents now. Marcus would be handing Tiffany a box containing diamond earrings or a designer bag playing the part of the devoted husband. She would be squealing, kissing him, thinking she had everything she ever wanted. She didn't know that the ground beneath her feet had already been sold. She didn't know that the man shivering in her garage owned the mortgage on her boutique, the lease on her warehouse, and as of 5 minutes ago, the controlling interest in her entire fashion line. I rubbed my hands together to generate some warmth. Let her have her morning. Let her have her victory lap. Tomorrow the bill comes due, and I will be the one collecting. The Worthingtons arrived at noon in a leased Mercedes that smelled of new leather and old desperation. Richard Worthington was a man who wore his insecurities like a neon sign. He was loud, expansive, and took up too much space in a room, shaking hands with a grip that was meant to dominate but only revealed his anxiety. His wife Karen, who had been orchestrating the chaos since last night, greeted him with a kiss on both cheeks, acting as if they were European royalty rather than a couple from the suburbs drowning in credit card debt. I was sitting in the kitchen eating a piece of dry toast when Tiffany called me into the dining room. Bring him in, she said to Marcus, her voice tight. My parents want to see him, and make sure he doesn't smell like the garage. I walked in slowly, shuffling my feet, keeping my head down. I wore a clean shirt, but I left the top button undone and let my suspenders hang slightly loose. I needed to look the part. The confused, harmless old man. The burden. Richard was already seated at the head of the table, a place that should have been for Marcus. He was swirling a glass of scotch midday, watching me approach with a look of amusement mixed with disgust. So, this is the famous Otis Richard boomed. He didn't stand up, he didn't offer a hand, he just gestured at me with his glass. Tiffany tells me you had quite the exciting evening yesterday, old-timer, confusing your meds with the wine. That is a dangerous game. I sat in the chair Marcus pulled out for me. It was placed slightly back from the table like a high chair for a toddler. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthington, I said softly. He laughed. A bark of a sound. Please call me Richard. Mr. Worthington is my father, though I suppose to you titles matter. You people always did care about hierarchy, didn't you? There it was. The first little sting. You people. He said it with a smile as if he were sharing a joke. I saw Marcus stiffen by the sideboard where he was pouring water. I caught his eye and gave him a tiny shake of my head. Not yet. Lunch was served. A seafood bisque that Tiffany had ordered from a catering company because she couldn't boil water without burning it. The conversation immediately turned to money. It always did with people who didn't have enough of it. Richard tore a piece of crusty bread and pointed it at Marcus. "Marcus, son, we need to talk strategy," Richard said, chewing with his mouth open. "Tiffany tells me the business is doing well, but liquidity is tight. You need capital if you want to expand into the international markets like we discussed." Marcus sat down. "We are doing fine, Richard. Growth is steady." "Steady is for turtles," Richard scoffed. "You need to be a hare. You need an infusion of cash. And Karen and I have been looking at your expenses. You are bleeding money in unnecessary places." He paused to slurp a spoonful of soup. He didn't look at me, but he waved his spoon in my direction. "Care costs, Marcus." Specialized care for the elderly is a drain on resources that could be used to build your legacy. Tiffany says you are paying for home health aides, special dietary needs. It adds up. "I don't have home health aides," I murmured. Richard ignored me. He didn't even blink. He kept his eyes on Marcus. "We have a friend," Richard continued. "He runs a facility upstate. Green Meadows. It is state subsidized. Very affordable. It is not the Ritz, obviously, but it is clean enough. And frankly, for someone in his condition, does he really know the difference between Egyptian cotton and polyester?" Karen chimed in, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. "Richard is right, Marcus. It is about allocation of resources. Otis would be with his own kind there. People with similar backgrounds. They have a television room. They play bingo. It is a simple life. He is a simple man. He would probably be happier there than in this big house, where he clearly doesn't fit in." I gripped the spoon in my hand, my own kind. Simple man. They talked about me as if I were a stray dog they were trying to rehome. They wanted to put me in a state warehouse, a place where people go to rot just to save a few $1,000s a month that they could then funnel into their own pockets. Marcus looked down at his plate. "I am not sending my father to a state home, Richard." Richard sighed as if he were explaining calculus to a slow child. "It is not forever, Marcus. Just until you get your liquidity up. Think about the future. Think about Tiffany. She deserves a certain standard of living. She shouldn't have to play nursemaid to a man who tries to poison her." "That is the other thing," Tiffany added, leaning forward. Her eyes were bright with greed. "We need to talk about the house on the south side, Pops's house." My head snapped up. "It is just sitting there," Tiffany said, "collecting dust. The neighborhood is gentrifying, Marcus. Developers are buying up lots. We could get maybe 600,000-700,000 for it as a teardown." Richard slammed his hand on the table. 700,000, he whistled. "Marcus, that is your capital right there. That is your investment seed. You sell that shack, put the old man in Green Meadows, and you have almost $1 million to play with. You could pay off, well, you could invest in the joint venture I was telling you about." I knew about the joint venture. My private investigator had briefed me. It was a Ponzi scheme dressed up as a real estate opportunity in Florida. Richard was desperate for buy-ins to cover his own losses. He wanted to liquidate my life to pay his gambling debts. "He doesn't need that house," Karen said, looking at me with a sneer. "Look at him. He doesn't even know what we are talking about. He is just staring at his soup." I was staring at my soup. It was a thick orange lobster bisque, very hot, very creamy, and very staining. Marcus looked at me. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were screaming. He knew they were crossing the line. He knew they were carving me up like a Thanksgiving turkey right in front of him. I decided it was time to join the conversation. I like my house," I stammered, making my voice wobble. "I planted the rose bushes in the back." "Betty liked the roses." Richard rolled his eyes. He laughed a cruel, dismissive sound. "Roses," he mocked. "Jesus, Marcus, listen to him. He is sentimental about weeds. The man is sitting on a gold mine and he is talking about flowers. This is exactly what I mean. He is not competent to make these decisions. You need power of attorney, son. You need to take the wheel before he drives the car off a cliff." He leaned back in his chair, expansive, arrogant. He was wearing a cream-colored linen suit. Italian. Very expensive. Very hard to clean. "You sell the house," Richard commanded, pointing a finger at Marcus. "You put the money in the fund. We handle the rest. We will take care of Otis. We will make sure he is comfortable. Take care of me. Just like they took care of their own finances. Just like they took care of their daughter, raising her to be a viper." I stood up. My legs shook. I made sure they shook. I grabbed my bowl of soup. I don't feel well, I said. I think I need to lie down. Sit down, Pops, Tiffany snapped. We aren't done talking. I ignored her. I shuffled around the table toward the door. To get there, I had to pass behind Richard. He didn't even turn his head. He was too busy counting my money in his head. Just sign the papers, Marcus, Richard said. Don't be soft. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. You have to... I was directly behind him. I let my right leg buckle. Just a little. Enough to make me stumble. Whoa, I cried out. I lurched forward. My hands holding the heavy porcelain bowl flew out as if seeking balance. The bowl tipped. It wasn't a splash. It was a deluge. A thick, hot orange waterfall of lobster bisque cascaded directly onto Richard Worthington's head. It glopped down his expensive haircut. It ran in rivulets down his neck, soaking into the collar of his custom shirt. It splattered all over the shoulders and back of his cream linen suit. He screamed. It was a high, girlish shriek that cut through the room. He jumped up, knocking his chair over. He clawed at his face, wiping away the soup, smearing it further into his clothes. You stupid old fool, he roared. You burned me. Look at my suit. This is Armani, you senile idiot. Karen was on her feet, grabbing napkins, dabbing frantically at her husband's back, making it worse. Oh my God, Richard, Karen yelled. It is ruined. It is completely ruined. Tiffany turned on me, her face twisted in fury. You did that on purpose. I know you did. I stood there, the empty bowl dangling from my hand. I looked at Richard dripping with soup, looking like a melted candle. I looked at the orange stains spreading across his arrogance. I tripped, I said, my voice trembling with fake fear. The rug, it is slippery. I am so sorry, Mr. Richard. I just wanted to go to my room. Marcus was at my side instantly. He put an arm around my shoulders. He wasn't looking at Richard. He was looking at the floor, and his shoulders were shaking. For a second, Tiffany thought he was crying. But I knew. I felt the vibration of his silent laughter against my ribs. It was an accident, Marcus said, his voice thick. He is old, Richard. His balance isn't what it used to be. Come on, Pops. Let's get you cleaned up. He led me away from the table, away from the screaming, swearing mess of the Worthington family. Get him out of here, Richard bellowed behind us. Put him in a home today. I want him gone. He is a menace. Marcus walked me into the hallway. Once we were out of sight, he leaned me against the wall. He looked at me, his eyes shining with a fierce, proud amusement. Lobster bisque, he whispered. Nice choice, Pops. That is never coming out. I straightened my jacket. I stopped shaking. He wanted to sell my house, I said quietly. He wanted to put me in a state home to fund his gambling debts. Marcus's smile faded. His face hardened into stone. I know, Dad. I heard him. He looked back toward the dining room where the shouting was still going on. Don't worry about the house, Marcus said. And don't worry about the nursing home. Richard Worthington is about to have much bigger problems than a stained suit. He checked his watch. Go upstairs to the guest room, he said. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Things are going to get ugly down here. I nodded. I watched my son walk back into the lion's den. He didn't look like prey anymore. He looked like the hunter. I climbed the stairs, listening to Richard cursing my name. I felt a grim satisfaction. The soup was just a warning shot. The war had officially begun, and the Worthingtons had no idea they were fighting a man who owned the battlefield. I waited in the guest room for 20 minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos downstairs. The walls of Marcus's house were thick, but they could not completely block out the shrieks of Karen Worthington complaining about the dry cleaning bill for her husband's linen suit. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my hands. They were steady. The adrenaline of the soup incident had faded, leaving behind a cold clarity. I was done playing games. I was done being the victim. There was a soft knock at the door. 3 rapid taps. It was a code Marcus and I used when he was a teenager trying to sneak back in after curfew. I unlocked it. Marcus slipped inside and locked the door behind him immediately. He looked exhausted. His tie was loosened and his eyes were bloodshot, but there was a sharpness to him that I had not seen in years. He didn't say a word. He just jerked his head toward the hallway, signaling me to follow. We moved silently through the house, avoiding the kitchen where the Worthingtons were likely still scrubbing lobster bisque out of expensive fabric. Marcus led me to his home office at the back of the house. It was a room I had rarely been invited into. It was his sanctuary, the place where he built his empire. He ushered me in and closed the heavy oak door. The sound of the lock clicking into place felt like the ceiling of a vault. The room smelled of old paper and ozone from the servers humming in the corner. "Sit down, Dad," Marcus said, pointing to the leather chair behind his massive mahogany desk. I hesitated. "That is your chair, son." "Not today," he said grimly. "Today you need to see what I see. You need to understand why I let this go on for so long." I sat. The chair was enormous, swallowing me up. Marcus walked around the desk and woke up his computer monitors. 3 screens flickered to life, filled with spreadsheets, bank statements, and legal documents. The glow of the screens illuminated his face, casting deep shadows under his eyes. He began typing furiously, bringing up file after file. "You think I have been blind?" Marcus said, his voice low and tight. "You think I let Tiffany and her parents walk all over me because I am weak, because I am afraid of losing her?" I didn't answer. I just watched him. He hit one final key and stepped back. "Look at the column on the right," he said, pointing at the center screen. "Look at the withdrawals labeled consulting fees." I leaned forward, adjusting my glasses. I might be old, but I know how to read a ledger. I spent 40 years in logistics. I know what money looks like when it is moving where it shouldn't. I scanned the numbers. $5,000 to a shell company in Nevada. $10,000 to a consulting firm in Atlantic City. $12,000 for interior design services that I knew never happened. It went on and on. Page after page of bleed. "She has been siphoning money from the company for 18 months, Marcus said. His voice broke slightly, but he cleared his throat and continued. "At first it was small, expense account padding, personal items charged as business supplies. But then her parents got involved. I looked at the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet, $214,000. My breath caught in my throat. That was not just spending money. That was operating capital. That was payroll. That was the lifeblood of his business. Where did it go, I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Gambling. Marcus spat the word out like poison. Richard and Karen. They are not just snobs, Dad. They are addicts. They owe money to bookies in 3 states. They lost their house in Connecticut 2 years ago. That is why they are always here. They have nowhere else to go. Tiffany has been funneling my profits to keep their knees from getting broken. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost blinded me. My son built this company from nothing. He worked 18-hour days. He missed meals. He missed sleep. And these parasites were draining him dry to feed their vices while treating him like he wasn't good enough to polish their shoes. Why didn't you stop her? I asked. I looked up at him. You are the CEO. You control the accounts. Why didn't you cut her off the moment you saw the first unauthorized transfer? Marcus looked away. He walked over to the window and stared out at the snow-covered yard. Because I couldn't, he whispered. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He hesitated, his thumb hovering over the screen. Then he walked back to the desk and placed the phone in front of me. Watch this, he said. He pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed in this very office. It showed Tiffany standing by the bookshelf. She was screaming. She was throwing books on the floor, tearing papers. Then she did something that made my stomach turn. She started hitting herself. She slapped her own face hard enough to leave a mark. She punched her own arm. She scratched her chest until she drew blood. Then she looked directly at Marcus, who was holding the camera, and smiled. A cold, dead smile. Go ahead, Marcus, she said on the video, her voice calm and terrifying. Leave me. Cut me off. I will call the police. I will tell them you did this. I will show them the bruises. I will ruin your company. I will ruin your reputation. You will never get another contract in this city. No one does business with a wife-beater. The video ended. I sat there in the silence, staring at the black screen of the phone. I felt sick. Physically sick. This was not just theft. This was extortion. This was the work of a sociopath. She has photos, Marcus said quietly. She has a folder on her laptop of staged injuries. She told me if I ever tried to divorce her or cut off her parents, she would release them to the press and file a restraining order. She knows the business relies on my public image. She knows an accusation like that, even a false one, would destroy everything I built. He slumped into the chair opposite me. He put his head in his hands. I was trapped, Dad, he said, his voice muffled. I didn't know what to do. So I let her take the money. I let her parents insult me. I let them treat you like dirt because I was trying to buy time. I was trying to find a way out without losing everything. I looked at my son. I saw the shame radiating off him. He was a proud man, a strong man, and she had used his strength against him. She had weaponized his success. I stood up. I walked around the desk. I put my hand on his shoulder. It was rock hard with tension. "You are not weak, son," I said firmly. "You are a survivor. You did what you had to do to keep the ship afloat. But the storm is over." Marcus looked up at me. His eyes were wet. "How is it over?" he asked. "She still has the photos. She still has the threat. She has nothing," I said. "Because you have something she doesn't know about." I pointed to the computer screen. "You have the paper trail," I said. "You have proof of embezzlement. That is a federal crime, Marcus. That is prison time. And you have that video. But if she claims abuse he started, let her claim it. I cut him off. Let her scream it from the rooftops. Because while she is screaming about abuse, we are going to be handing over evidence of grand larceny and extortion to the district attorney." I leaned in close, my voice dropping to a growl. "She plays dirty, Marcus. She plays with lies and shadows. But we are Jenkins men. We play the law. We play with facts. And the fact is she stole $250,000. I walked over to the window and looked out. I could see the guest house where Tiffany's parents were staying. I imagined them in there counting their winnings, laughing at the stupid husband and his senile father. But first, I said, turning back to Marcus, "We have to stop the bleeding. We have to cut the cord." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, standing up. "I mean we cut the money," I said. "All of it. Right now. You freeze the joint accounts. You cancel the credit cards. You put a lock on the business assets." "She will go crazy," Marcus said. "She will release the photos." "Let her try," I said. "Because by the time she realizes the cards don't work, we will already be 2 steps ahead." I looked at the clock on the wall. It was just past 1 in the afternoon. The banks were closed for the holiday, but Marcus had online admin access. "Do it," I commanded. "Sit down at that computer and kill the cards, every single one. Her personal card, her parents' authorized user cards, the emergency fund. Drain it all into a secure holding account she cannot touch." Marcus looked at the computer. Then he looked at me. He took a deep breath. He sat down. He started typing. I watched him work. I watched the fear leave his face, replaced by focus. He was taking his power back, 1 click at a time. "Done," he said 5 minutes later. "The accounts are frozen. The cards are dead. She has nothing but the cash in her purse." "Good," I said. "Now we wait for what he asked. For the scream," I said, "because a parasite doesn't scream when you look at it. It screams when you pull it off the host." And we just ripped them all off. We sat in the office for a moment longer, enjoying the silence. It felt like the calm before a hurricane. But this time we were the ones controlling the weather. Marcus looked at me. "Dad, what about the nursing home? What if they try to—" "They can't do anything," I said. "They have no money to pay for a lawyer to file the papers. They have no money to bribe a doctor. Without your money, Marcus, they are toothless." I walked to the door and unlocked it. "Come on," I said. "Let's go have some of that leftover turkey. I have a feeling we are going to need our strength. When Tiffany tries to swipe that card tomorrow and it declines, the real show is going to start." Marcus stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He adjusted his tie. He looked like the CEO again. "You are right, Pops," he said. "Let's go eat." We walked out of the office together. 2 men, 1 blood, 1 mission. We were going to dismantle Tiffany's life brick by brick, and we were going to use the law as our sledgehammer. The embezzlement was the key. It was the leverage we needed to bury her false accusations. She wanted a war. She was about to get a revolution. The next morning the house was quiet, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Tiffany had woken up late, her eyes puffy, but her spirit unbroken. She was a creature of habit, and her habit was spending money to soothe her ego. When things went wrong, when she felt threatened or humiliated, she didn't reflect. She shopped. It was her armor. If she could buy a $10,000 bag, she was still the queen, regardless of what had happened the night before. I sat in the kitchen nursing a cup of tea, watching her storm around. She didn't look at me. She grabbed her keys, the ones to the Mercedes that technically belonged to the company Marcus built, which meant it now belonged to me. She called her friends a gaggle of women who looked like they were manufactured in the same factory of high cheekbones and hollow souls. "I need a girls' day," I heard her say into her phone. "Let's do lunch at Le Bilboquet and then hit the boutiques. I need to get away from this toxic energy." She glanced at me when she said toxic energy. I just slurped my tea, making sure to make it sound particularly annoying. She left in a cloud of exhaust and entitlement. Marcus came down a few minutes later. He watched the car disappear down the driveway. "She is going to Hermes," he said. "She always goes there when she is mad. She thinks a Birkin will fix her reputation." He looked at me. His hand was hovering over his phone. "Is it done?" he asked. I nodded. "I called the trust manager at 6 a.m. The freeze is total, Marcus. Personal cards, business cards, the line of credit attached to the house. It is all locked down tighter than Fort Knox." Marcus let out a breath that he seemed to have been holding for years. "She is going to lose it," he said. I smiled. "That is the point, son." We waited. It was a strange, quiet vigil. We sat in the living room like two generals waiting for the report from the front lines. Marcus had his laptop open, monitoring the accounts. I just sat in my chair picturing the scene. I knew exactly how it would go. Tiffany would strut into the store. The sales associates would greet her by name, not because they liked her, but because she spent money she didn't have. Her friends would be cooing over scarves and perfumes, validating her victimhood. Tiffany would pick out something obscene, maybe a handbag, maybe a silk scarf for her mother to replace the one stained with lobster bisque. She would walk to the counter chin high, expecting the world to bow. At 1:15 p.m., Marcus's phone pinged. He looked at the screen. Attempted transaction, he read. Hermes Buckhead, $12,400. Declined. I leaned back. Here we go. A minute later, it pinged again. Attempted transaction. Same amount. Declined. Then a flurry of pings. 5,000, 2,000, 500. She was trying everything. She was trying different cards. She was trying to split the payment. She was trying to buy a keychain just to prove she could. Declined. 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 The house phone rang. It was the landline. Tiffany never called the landline unless she couldn't get through to Marcus's cell, which he had conveniently put on Do Not Disturb. I let it ring 3 times. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to stand there at the counter with the line forming behind her and her judgmental friends watching, holding a piece of plastic that was now worth less than the gum on the bottom of her shoe. I picked up the phone on the 4th ring. "Hello," I said, my voice slow and raspy. "The Jenkins residence." "Otis," she screamed. The sound was so loud I had to pull the receiver away from my ear. "Put Marcus on the phone, right now." "He is not here, Tiffany," I said, lying effortlessly. He went to check on a job site. He left his phone charging. She let out a noise of pure frustration. It sounded like an animal caught in a trap. "Listen to me, you useless old man," she hissed. "There is something wrong with the bank. The internet must be down at the house. Did you touch something? Did you touch the computer in the office?" I looked across the room at the modem blinking happily on the shelf. The green lights were steady. The internet was perfectly fine. The computer, I asked, feigning confusion. "No, I didn't touch the computer. But, well, I was trying to clean up earlier." "What did you do?" she shrieked. "I am standing at the register, Otis. My cards are not working. The system says connection error. What did you do?" I paused. I let the silence stretch until I could hear her breathing short and panicked. "Well," I said slowly, "I was dusting near that black box with the blinking lights, the one in the hallway. And I might have, well, my hand shook a little. I spilled my coffee. Just a little bit. Right on top of it, it sparked a little Tiffany. Do you think that is important?" There was a silence on the other end that was heavy with rage. "You spilled coffee on the modem," she whispered. The venom in her voice was palpable. "You spilled coffee on the server. You stupid, senile, incompetent. Do you have any idea what you have done? You crashed the system. You cut off the bank authorization." She wasn't making any sense technically, but in her panic she was grabbing at straws. She needed a reason why her world was failing that wasn't her own fault. Blaming the old man and a clumsy accident was easier than facing the reality that she was broke. "Fix it!" she screamed. "Fix it now. Plug it back in. Dry it off. I don't care. I have people staring at me, Otis. Do you understand? I look like a fool." "I am sorry, daughter-in-law," I said, keeping my voice trembling and pathetic. "I think it is broken. The lights are all out. Maybe it is a network error. I don't know how to fix these modern machines." "Ugh," she groaned. "You are useless. You are absolutely useless. Just don't touch anything else. I am coming home. And when I get there, if I find out you broke the internet, you are going to sleep in the snow. Do you hear me?" She hung up. I placed the receiver back on the cradle gently. I looked at Marcus. He was looking at me with a mixture of awe and sorrow. She really talks to you like that, he said quietly. Every time you leave the room, I said. I picked up my mug of tea. It was still warm. I hadn't spilled a drop. The coffee on the modem story was absurd. It wouldn't shut down a credit card terminal across town. But Tiffany didn't know how the money worked. She didn't know where the funds came from. She thought it was magic. She thought she swiped a card and the universe provided. She didn't understand that the universe was actually a 73-year-old man who had just turned off the tap. She is coming home, I said. She is humiliated. She is angry. She is going to come through that door looking for a fight. Let her come, Marcus said. He stood up and walked over to the modem. He unplugged it. Why did you do that? I asked. Marcus smiled, a cold, hard smile. Let's make your story true, Pops. Let's give her a broken modem to scream at. While she is distracted yelling about the Wi-Fi, she won't notice that I have packed her bags. I raised an eyebrow. You packed her bags? I started this morning, he said, while she was getting ready for her shopping trip. I moved her suitcases to the mudroom. When she walks in, she is not going to find a husband ready to fix her problems. She is going to find a landlord ready to evict a tenant. I nodded. It was a good plan. But I knew Tiffany. She wouldn't go quietly. The credit card decline was just the first domino. When she realized the money wasn't just paused but gone, she would lash out. She would get desperate. And a desperate animal is the most dangerous kind. I sat back in my chair and waited. I thought about the Hermes store. I imagined the sales clerk taking the bag back from the counter. I imagined Tiffany's friends, the ones who only liked her for her picking up the check, whispering behind their hands. I imagined the long, silent drive home in a car she couldn't afford to put gas in. The humiliation she felt right now was nothing compared to what was coming. She thought she was having a bad day. She didn't know she was having the last day of her old life. Otis Jenkins was done being the nice guy. I had played the fool long enough. Now I was playing the bank. And the bank always wins. Tiffany did not come home screaming. She did not kick down the door. She did not throw the modem at my head. When her Mercedes pulled into the driveway an hour later, the silence was more terrifying than the noise. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out of the car. She left her shopping bags in the trunk. She walked past the suitcases Marcus had piled by the front door without even glancing at them. She walked with a strange, calculated fragility, one hand resting protectively over her flat stomach. She entered the living room where Marcus, the Worthingtons, and I were waiting. The air was so thick with tension you could choke on it. Marcus stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, ready for war. Richard and Karen were nursing their third drinks of the afternoon, grumbling about the indignity of the soup stains on Richard's suit. Tiffany stopped in the center of the room. She looked at Marcus. Her eyes were wet, glistening with fresh, summoned tears. She took a shuddering breath. I went to the clinic after the store, she whispered. Her voice was soft, trembling. I thought the nausea last night. I thought it was the wine or the stress, but it wasn't. She paused for dramatic effect. She looked at her mother, then at me, and finally locked eyes with Marcus. I am pregnant, Marcus. We are having a baby. The room exploded. Karen shrieked and dropped her glass. Richard jumped up, forgetting his anger, pumping his fist like he had just won the lottery. Oh, my baby girl, Karen wailed, rushing to hug her. A grandbaby, a blessing. I sat frozen in my chair. I looked at Marcus. His face had gone gray. All the blood had drained from it, leaving him looking like a wax statue. He stared at his wife, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with a shock that looked like joy to everyone else. But I knew my son. I knew that look. That wasn't joy. That was the look of a man watching a train wreck in slow motion. Because 1 year ago, on a rainy Tuesday in November, I had driven Marcus to a private clinic in Buckhead. I sat in the waiting room reading old magazines while he went in for a procedure. A vasectomy. He had told me then, Pops, I am not bringing a child into this marriage until I know if it is going to survive. He never told Tiffany. He kept the paperwork at my house in my old safe. So unless the Holy Spirit had visited Tiffany in the Hermes dressing room, that baby was a lie. Or worse, it belonged to someone else. Marcus blinked. He swallowed hard. He forced his lips into a smile that looked painful. Pregnant, he said. His voice was hoarse. Are you sure? Positive Tiffany beamed her confidence, returning now that she had the ultimate shield. The doctor confirmed it. 6 weeks along. That is why I have been so emotional lately, honey. That is why I spent the money. I was nesting. I was scared. She walked over to him and wrapped her arms around his stiff body. We are going to be a family, Marcus. You, me, and the baby. You can't kick us out now. You can't evict the mother of your child. She looked over his shoulder at me. Her eyes were cold, triumphant. She had played her ace. She knew Marcus. She knew his sense of duty. She knew he would never risk abandoning his own flesh and blood. She thought she had checkmated him. She didn't know she was playing against a stacked deck. Richard Worthington clapped Marcus on the back hard. A Jenkins air, he boomed. Well, half Worthington, thank God. This changes everything, son. You need to stabilize the assets. You need to secure the future. He turned his predatory gaze on me. Otis Richard said, his voice dripping with false camaraderie. Congratulations, Grandpa. I think this is the sign we have been waiting for. I blinked, playing my role. A baby, I stammered. A little one? Yes, Pops, Tiffany said, pulling away from Marcus and stepping toward me. She knelt by my chair, taking my rough hands in her manicured ones. A grandchild. Your legacy. But Pops, we are scared. Scared, I asked. Why? Money. She sighed. The business is tight, Marcus is stressed, and this house, it isn't safe for a baby. The stairs are too steep. The neighborhood is, well, you know, we need a nest egg. We need security. She squeezed my hand. Her nails dug into my skin. That house on the south side, Pops, the one you are holding on to. It is worth $800,000 to a developer. Think about what that money could do for your grandchild. College funds, a safe nursery, a fresh start for all of us. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. If you don't sign that house over Otis, you will never see this baby. I will make sure of it. I will take this child and disappear. You will die alone without ever holding your grandbaby. Do you understand me? I looked into her eyes. I saw the desperation there. The credit cards were dead. The bank accounts were frozen. This was her last play. She was holding a hypothetical infant hostage to extort an old man out of his property. It was the lowest, vilest thing I had ever seen, and it was perfect. I looked up at Marcus. He was watching us. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He knew. He knew she was lying. He knew she was manipulating me, and he was giving me the green light to close the trap. I let a tear roll down my cheek. I made my lip tremble. A baby, I whispered loud enough for the room to hear. A baby changes everything. I don't want my grandbaby to struggle. I don't want him to be poor like I was. Tiffany's eyes lit up. She smelled blood. Exactly, Pop, she cooed. You can be the hero. You can save this family. Just sign the deed over to Marcus. We will handle the sale. We will put the money in a trust for the baby. I looked at Richard and Karen. They were practically salivating. $800,000. That would pay off their bookies and keep them in scotch for a year. I took a deep breath. I stood up slowly, leaning heavily on the table. You are right, I said. My voice was shaky but clear. I have been selfish, holding on to that old place for sentimental reasons. But a new life, that is more important. Tiffany jumped up and clapped her hands. Oh, thank you, Pops. Thank you, Marcus, get the papers. We can do it right now. No, I said. The room froze. No, Tiffany asked, her smile faltering. Not now, I said. Not like this. In the kitchen with soup on the floor and everyone angry. This is big. This is my legacy. I straightened my spine just a little. I looked at Richard. You said I should be proud, Richard. You said I should show the world I can provide. Well, I want to do that. If I am going to give you my life's work, I want to do it properly. What do you mean? Marcus asked, playing along perfectly. A party, I said. A real celebration. Tomorrow night. We invite everyone. The mayor, your business partners, our neighbors. We announce the pregnancy. And then in front of God and everyone, I will sign the deed to the house over to you and Tiffany, as a gift to my grandchild. Tiffany frowned. Tomorrow? But why wait? We can just... I raised a hand. I am an old man, Tiffany. I want my moment. I want people to see that Otis Jenkins took care of his own. If you want the house, you give me the party. The mayor was here tonight, but he left thinking I was a drunk. I want him to come back tomorrow and see me as a benefactor." Richard stepped in. He loved the idea. He loved an audience. "He is right, Tiffany," Richard said. "It is a brilliant idea, a public signing. It solidifies our standing in the community. It shows stability, and frankly, it locks the old man in. Witnesses, Tiffany. Witnesses make it harder to contest later." Tiffany bit her lip. She looked at Marcus. "Fine," she said. "Tomorrow night. But we do it big. Caterers, champagne. I will invite the press. Invite the world," I said. "I want everyone to see." She hugged me then. It was a cold, hard hug. She whispered in my ear again. "Smart move, old man. One last moment in the spotlight before you go to the kennel. Enjoy it." She pulled away, beaming. She turned to her mother. "Mom, we have to plan. We need flowers. We need a dress that shows off the bump." Well, there is no bump yet, but something maternal. They rushed out of the room, a whirlwind of greed and excitement. They had won. They had the house. They had the money. Marcus waited until they were gone. He walked over to me. His face was pale, his eyes haunted. "She is lying, Dad," he whispered. "I know she is lying." "I know, son," I said. I patted his arm. "But why the party?" he asked. "Why give her a stage?" "Because," I said, my voice turning to iron. "When you hang a thief, you don't do it in the dark. You build a gallows in the town square. You let everyone see the drop." I looked at the door where she had exited. "She wants a party. She wants the press. Fine. I will give her the biggest audience of her life. And then I am going to burn her world to the ground." Marcus looked at me. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. "I will call the caterers," he said. "And I said, reaching for my coat. "I have an appointment with a man named Ray." "Ray. The private investigator," I said. "Tiffany thinks she is pregnant. Ray is going to find out who the father is, or if the father is just a figment of her imagination and a desperate need for cash." I walked out into the snow. The cold air felt good. It felt clean. Tiffany had escalated the war. She had brought a child, real or fake, into the battlefield. That was a mistake. She thought the baby was her shield. She didn't realize it was actually the shovel she was using to dig her own grave. And tomorrow night, in front of the mayor and all her fancy friends, I was going to push her in. I slipped out of the house while Tiffany and her mother were screaming at each other about the color of the napkins. They were in the dining room, surrounded by fabric swatches, arguing over whether eggshell or cream would look better for the cameras. It was a grotesque display of vanity. They were planning a party to celebrate a theft, and they wanted to make sure the lighting was flattering while they robbed me. I didn't take the main car. I walked down the long, frozen driveway to the street where I had parked my old Ford pickup truck. Tiffany hated that truck. She said it looked like a rusted scar on the neighborhood. I loved it. It was reliable. It was tough. And unlike her, it had never lied to me. I drove toward the city, leaving the manicured lawns of the suburbs behind. The sky was turning a bruised purple as the sun went down. I was heading to a diner on the edge of the industrial district, a place called Mel's, where the coffee tasted like battery acid, and the booths were taped together with duct tape. It was the kind of place people like Tiffany didn't believe existed. Ray was waiting for me in the back booth. Ray was a man who blended into the background. He was short, balding, and wore a beige jacket that made him look like a tired accountant. But Ray was the best private investigator in Atlanta. He could find a needle in a haystack and then tell you who sold the needle and for how much. I sat down across from him. The vinyl seat squeaked. "You look like hell, Otis," Ray said. He didn't smile. He pushed a cup of coffee toward me. "I feel like hell," I said, "but I am still standing. What do you have for me?" Ray reached into his bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He placed it on the table, his hand resting on top of it. He looked me in the eye, and his expression was grim. "You are not going to like this, Otis," he said. "I have seen some dirty games in my time. I have seen spouses hide assets. I have seen secret families. But this is cold." "Tell me," I said. I took a sip of the terrible coffee. It burned my throat, waking me up. "First the baby," Ray said. He opened the envelope and slid a photo across the table. It was a picture of a man in a white coat. He was standing outside a luxury car dealership, shaking hands with Tiffany. "That is Dr. Evans," Ray said. "He is an OB-GYN with a practice in Buckhead. He has a gambling problem and 2 ex-wives he pays alimony to. Yesterday afternoon, 2 hours before Tiffany came home and announced her miracle, she met him in the parking lot of that dealership. Ray slid another photo across. It showed Tiffany handing the doctor a thick white envelope. Cash, Ray said. $5,000. I ran a check on the doctor's financials. He deposited it an hour later, and in exchange he created a digital file for a patient named Tiffany Jenkins, 6 weeks pregnant, ultrasound confirmed. I looked at the photo. Tiffany looked happy. Not the happiness of an expectant mother, but the happiness of a woman buying a new purse. So there is no baby, I said. My voice was flat. There is no baby, Ray confirmed. She isn't pregnant, Otis. She is barren. I found her medical records from 3 years ago. She had a procedure, a tubal ligation. She did it right after she married Marcus. She never wanted kids. She just wanted the lifestyle. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. She had sterilized herself in secret, and now she was using a fake pregnancy to extort a house from me. It was monstrous. It was a lie so big, so foundational, that it made everything else she said crumble into dust. But that is not the worst part, Ray said. He leaned forward. The diner was noisy dishes clattering a radio playing country music, but Ray's voice cut through it all. She isn't just lying about the baby Otis. She is securing her exit strategy. She knows the business is bleeding because she bled it. She knows Marcus is stressed. She is betting on him failing, and she has a backup plan. Ray pulled out a tablet from his bag. He tapped the screen and turned it toward me. It was a video. Grainy shot from a distance, probably from a parked car. It showed the entrance to a boutique hotel in Midtown. It was daytime. I watched as Tiffany's Mercedes pulled up to the valet. She got out. She was wearing a trench coat and sunglasses. She looked around nervously, then hurried inside. A minute later, another car pulled up, a black BMW. A man got out. He tossed his keys to the valet and jogged up the steps. I froze. I knew that walk. I knew that suit. It was Trent. Trent was Marcus's business partner. They had been roommates in college. Marcus had been the best man at Trent's wedding. Trent was the godfather to the children Marcus hoped to have one day. Trent was the CFO of the company. He was the one who was supposed to be watching the books. No, I whispered. Not Trent. Yes, Ray said. Trent. The video cut to the hotel lobby. It showed them meeting by the elevators. They didn't shake hands. Trent grabbed her by the waist and pulled her into a corner. They kissed. It wasn't a friendly kiss. It was hungry. Desperate. Ray swiped the screen. Another video. This one was from inside a restaurant. They were sitting at a back table holding hands. I tapped into the audio from a directional mic, Ray said. Listen. He pressed play. The sound was fuzzy, but the voices were clear. Old man is going to sign the house over tomorrow, Tiffany was saying. 800,000. Once we have that, we liquidate. And Marcus Trent's voice asked, he will be too busy dealing with the bankruptcy to notice we are gone. Tiffany laughed. I will file for divorce the day the check clears. I will cite financial instability. With the fake abuse evidence, I will get full custody of the imaginary baby and a massive settlement. We take the money and we go to Cabo just like we planned. Trent laughed too. Poor Marcus. He really thinks he is a businessman. He never even noticed I was cooking the books alongside you. He trusts me. That is his problem. He trusts everyone. The video ended. I sat there staring at the black screen. My hands were shaking not with age but with a violence I hadn't felt since I fought in the Union Wars back in the 70s. This was not just a bad marriage. This was a conspiracy. My son wasn't just married to a thief. He was in business with a snake. They were dismantling his life from both ends. They were going to leave him penniless, heartbroken, and alone while they drank margaritas on a beach paid for with my sweat and his blood. Can I keep this? I asked, pointing to the tablet. It is yours, Ray said. He handed me a USB drive. Everything is on there. The doctor's bribe. The medical records proving she can't have kids. The video of the affair. The audio of them planning to frame Marcus and run. I closed my hand around the drive. It felt hot against my palm. This wasn't just evidence. It was a nuclear bomb. Does Marcus know? Ray asked, gently. No, I said. He knows she is a thief. He knows she is a liar. But he doesn't know about Trent. That is going to kill him. Better a quick death than a slow poison, Ray said. I nodded. He was right. Marcus needed to know. But not yet. If I told him now, he might explode. He might kill Trent. He might tip his hand before we had the legal noose around their necks. I need one more thing, Ray, I said. Name it. I need you to find out where Trent is stashing the money he stole. If he was cooking the books, he didn't spend it all. Cayman Islands, Ray said immediately. I already tracked it. Shell company called Blue Horizon. I have the account numbers. I have the wire transfers. You are good, I said. I am expensive, Ray corrected with a small smile. But I am worth it. I pulled out a roll of cash from my pocket. My secret stash. I counted out $5,000. Bonus, I said, for being fast and for being loyal. Ray took the money. Good luck tomorrow, Otis. Be careful. These two. They are desperate. And they are cornered. If they figure out, they might do something drastic. They already tried. I said, thinking of the white powder in the wine. They missed. They won't get a second shot. I walked out of the diner. The wind was howling now, a bitter winter gale. I got into my truck and threw the USB drive onto the passenger seat. I drove back toward the suburbs, my mind racing. I had the ammunition. I had the truth. But I had to play this perfectly. Tiffany wanted a party. She wanted a public signing. She wanted to humiliate me one last time before she discarded me. She didn't know that the guest of honor at her party wasn't going to be me. It was going to be the truth. I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark except for the porch light. Marcus's car was there. Tiffany's car was there. I looked at the garage. My cold, empty room awaited. I climbed the stairs to the servants' quarters. I sat on the bed and took out the USB drive. I plugged it into my old laptop. I watched the videos again. I watched Trent kissing my daughter-in-law. I watched them laughing about destroying my son. I felt the anger solidify into something cold and heavy, like a stone in my chest. Tomorrow night I would stand in front of everyone. I would let Tiffany have her moment. I would let her preen and gloat. And then I would turn on the projector. I closed the laptop. I laid down on the lumpy mattress fully clothed, wrapping my coat around me for warmth. Sleep well, Tiffany, I whispered into the darkness. Sleep well, Trent, because tomorrow the nightmare begins, and I am going to be the monster under your bed. I barely had 1 foot out of my truck when the floodlights blinded me. It was only 7 in the evening, but the winter sky was already pitch black, and Tiffany had turned the driveway into an interrogation room. She stood on the porch steps wrapped in a white cashmere coat, her arms crossed and her foot tapping a frantic rhythm on the frozen concrete. She looked like an ice queen waiting to execute a traitor. "Where have you been?" she screamed, her voice shrill enough to crack the icicles hanging from the gutters. I shuffled toward her, hunching my shoulders, acting the part of the confused geriatric. I made sure to leave the USB drive deep in my inner pocket. I just went for a drive. Tiffany, I stammered, to clear my head. The air in the room, it was stuffy. A drive, she repeated. She marched down the steps and got right in my face. You are not allowed to drive, Otis. You are confused. You are sick. You poisoned me yesterday, and today you disappear for hours without telling anyone. Do you know how irresponsible that is? I didn't poison anyone, I whispered, looking at my boots. Stop lying, she hissed. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her nails digging through my heavy coat. You are a liability. I have the mayor coming tomorrow. I have the press coming. And I cannot have a senile old man wandering the streets telling God knows who, what kind of crazy stories. She dragged me toward the garage, not the house. The garage. Where are we going? I asked, feigning panic. Your room is where I say it is, she snapped. You proved tonight that you cannot be trusted in the main house. You wander, you break things, you spill coffee on expensive electronics. And now you disappear. No more. She pulled a key from her pocket. It was a heavy iron key that opened the side door to the servants' quarters. She shoved me inside. The air in the room hit me like a physical blow. It was colder inside than it was outside. The insulation in the garage was non-existent, and the small space heater I had used the night before was gone. She had taken it. Tiffany, it is freezing in here, I said, my breath forming white clouds in the gloom. Please, the heater. No heater, she said, standing in the doorway. Heaters are fire hazards, and you are clearly too incompetent to use one safely. You will burn the house down. But I will freeze, I said. Put on another sweater, she said dismissively. There are blankets on the bed. You will survive. People like you are tough, right? You always brag about how hard your life was. Well, here is your chance to relive the glory days. She reached for the door handle. And don't expect dinner, she added, her eyes gleaming with malice. The kitchen is closed. I am not wasting food on someone who isn't grateful. Maybe a night on an empty stomach will clarify your mind for tomorrow. You need to be sharp for the signing ceremony. She slammed the door. I heard the heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding home. Then I heard something else. The sound of a padlock snapping shut on the outside hasp. She had locked me in. I was a prisoner in a building I owned. I stood in the dark for a moment, listening to her heels clicking away on the pavement. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks in the window frames. The cold began to seep into my clothes immediately, seeking out my skin, seeking out the warmth of my blood. I walked over to the bed and sat down. The mattress was stiff with cold. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but it felt like wearing a sheet of paper against a blizzard. My stomach rumbled. I hadn't eaten since the diner with Ray. The hunger was a sharp cramp, but it was nothing compared to the cold. I lay down and pulled the thin, dusty blankets up to my chin. I stared at the ceiling beams visible in the dim light coming from the street lamp outside. The cold has a way of unlocking memories. It strips away the comfort of the present and drags you back to the hardest times. As I shivered, my mind drifted back 40 years. It was 1984, a winter just like this one. Chicago. I was working double shifts at the docks loading crates until my back felt like it was made of broken glass. Betty was sick with the flu, and Marcus was just a toddler barely walking. We lived in a 2-room walk-up with paper-thin walls and a landlord who didn't believe in maintenance. The furnace had died in January. We didn't have the money to fix it, and the landlord said the part was on back order. For 3 weeks, we lived in sub-zero temperatures. I remember coming home with my hands so frozen I couldn't unbutton my shirt. I remember seeing my breath in the kitchen, but what I remember most was the night the temperature dropped to 20 below. We had one electric blanket, one, and we wrapped Marcus in it. Betty and I slept in our coats, huddled together on the floor beside his crib, using our body heat to create a wall against the frost. I didn't sleep that night. I watched my son breathe. I watched the tiny puff of white air from his lips, and I swore to God and to myself that he would never know this cold again. I swore that I would break my back, I would bleed, I would die before I let my family freeze. I worked 3 jobs that year. I saved every dime. I ate leftovers from the diner dumpster so I could buy fresh milk for the boy. I built my company from the scrap metal of my own suffering. And now here I was, 73 years old, a millionaire 3 times over, freezing in a garage because a woman who never worked a day in her life decided I was inconvenient. The irony tasted like bile in my throat. Tiffany thought this was punishment. She thought she was breaking me. She didn't understand that she was forging me. She was reminding me of who I was. I was the man who survived the winter of '84. I was the man who stared down union busters and mobsters. A night in the cold wasn't torture. It was a reminder. But I wasn't just enduring this for the sake of nostalgia. I wasn't just shivering to prove I was tough. I turned my head slightly on the pillow. I looked toward the top shelf of the old metal racking unit in the corner of the room. It was piled high with old paint cans and oily rags, but nestled in the shadows between 2 cans of primer was a tiny black circle, a lens. Marcus had installed it yesterday while I was out. A wireless security camera battery operated with a direct feed to a cloud server. It had night vision. It had audio. I knew it was recording. I knew that right now, somewhere in the main house, Marcus was watching this feed on his phone. He was seeing his father curled up in a ball, shaking from hypothermia. He was hearing the wind howl. He was seeing the padlock on the door. It must be killing him. I knew my son. He was a good man. Watching this must be tearing his heart out. He probably wanted to run out here right now with an axe and break down the door. He probably wanted to strangle Tiffany with his bare hands. But he wouldn't, because I had made him promise. Hold the line, son, I had told him. We need the proof. We don't just need to prove she is greedy. We need to prove she is abusive. We need to prove criminal negligence. Locking an elderly man in an unheated building in winter without food is a felony. It is attempted manslaughter if I don't survive the night. So I performed. I didn't fake the shivering, it was real enough. But I made sure to cough. A dry, hacking cough that sounded weak and pathetic. I made sure to curl up small to look frail. I spoke out loud to the empty room, my voice trembling. Please, I whispered to the air, knowing the microphone would pick it up. Please, Tiffany. Just a blanket, just some water. I am so cold. I wasn't begging her. I was building her prison cell. Every shiver was another month added to her sentence. Every hour I spent in this freezer was another nail in her coffin. I closed my eyes. The cold was seeping into my bones, making my joints ache with a dull, throbbing pain. I focused on the anger. I let it burn in my chest like a furnace. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I would walk into that party. I would sign her papers. I would smile for her cameras. And then I would play this video. I would show the world the real Tiffany. I would show them the woman who locks old men in freezers while she sleeps on silk sheets. I thought about the baby she pretended to carry. I thought about the affair she was having with Trent. I thought about the money she stole. And then I thought about Marcus, my boy. The boy I kept warm in 1984. He was keeping me warm now, not with a blanket, but with his loyalty. He was gathering the ammunition to save us both. I pulled my knees to my chest. I buried my face in my coat collar. I let the cold come. Let it freeze me, I thought. Let it turn my heart to ice. Because when the sun comes up tomorrow, I am going to need to be cold. I am going to need to be heartless. I am going to destroy her, and I am going to enjoy every second of it. The sun came up over the frozen driveway at 7 in the morning. I was awake long before that, sitting on the edge of the mattress in the garage, listening to the birds start their day. I was cold, stiff, and hungry, but my mind was sharper than a razor blade. When the heavy padlock finally clicked open from the outside, I didn't jump up. I stayed seated. I let Tiffany see exactly what she had done. She pushed the door open, letting in a blast of winter air and blinding sunlight. She was already dressed for battle, wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming cup of coffee that she had no intention of sharing. She looked at me, huddled in my coat, and curled her lip in disgust. "Get up, Otis," she snapped. "The caterers are arriving in an hour. I need you out of here and cleaned up. You smell like oil and old age." I stood up slowly, letting my joints crack audibly. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her, stepping out into the morning light. The fresh air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. It tasted like victory. The house was already a hive of activity. A team of people I didn't know were setting up tables in the grand foyer. There were florists arranging massive bouquets of white lilies and blue hydrangeas. A bartender was polishing glasses. It was a production. A stage set for the grand performance of Tiffany the Benevolent Mother. I went to the guest room to shower. The hot water felt like a miracle against my frozen skin. I scrubbed the garage dust off my body, but I couldn't scrub away the memory of the cold. I put on my suit, the same charcoal bespoke suit I had worn the night of the failed poisoning. It was a little wrinkled now, a little stiff from the snow I had been thrown into, but I refused to wear anything else. This suit was my armor. It was the skin of the man I really was, not the man they thought they were robbing. When I came downstairs, the transformation was complete. The house looked like a magazine spread. There was a banner hung over the fireplace that read "Baby Jenkins" in gold script. It was a lie written in glitter. Guests started arriving at 6. These were not my friends. These were not Marcus's friends. They were the people Tiffany wanted to be. The Buckhead social climbers, the Junior League wives, the men who leased cars they couldn't afford to park in driveways they didn't own. They came in smelling of expensive cologne and ambition, handing Tiffany gifts wrapped in silver paper. I stood near the staircase watching them. I saw Richard and Karen Worthington holding court by the bar. Richard had replaced his ruined linen suit with a navy one, but he still looked sweaty and desperate. He was laughing too loud, drinking too fast. He was celebrating a payday that hadn't cleared yet. Tiffany spotted me. She excused herself from a group of women admiring her non-existent baby bump and marched over to me. Her smile was plastered on, but her eyes were deadly. "What are you doing standing here?" she hissed through her teeth. "You look like a scarecrow." "I am just greeting the guests, Tiffany," I said. "No, you are not," she said. She grabbed my elbow, her nails digging into the fabric of my suit. "You are an embarrassment. Look at that suit. It is wrinkled. You look like you slept in a gutter." "I slept in a garage," I reminded her. "Because you locked me in it." She didn't flinch. "Keep your voice down. Listen to me, old man. You are going to sit at the table in the back corner, the one by the kitchen door. You are not to speak to anyone unless spoken to. You are not to drink. You are not to wander. You sit there, you look grateful, and when I call you up to sign the papers, you walk up, you sign, and you smile. Do you understand? I looked at the table she was pointing to. It was a small, round folding table set up near the service entrance. It was clearly meant for the vendors or the help. It was as far away from the VIPs as possible without putting me in the pantry. I understand, I said. Good, she said. She smoothed my lapel with a fake affectionate gesture for the benefit of anyone watching. Don't ruin this, Otis, for your grandchild's sake. She walked away, hips swaying back into the spotlight. I walked to my assigned seat. I sat down. The chair was wobbly. From my vantage point, I could see the entire room. I saw Marcus circulating. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but his face was pale. He caught my eye from across the room. He gave a tiny nod. He was ready. The projector was set up. The files were loaded. The trap was primed. The room filled up. The noise level rose. Waiters passed trays of champagne. I sat alone, my hands folded on the table. A few people glanced at me, wondering who the old man in the rumpled suit was, but they quickly looked away. I was invisible. I was furniture. Then the energy in the room shifted. A hush rippled through the crowd near the front door. The heavy oak doors swung open and a man walked in, flanked by 2 security guards. It was Mayor Franklin. He was a tall man with a presence that commanded attention. He wasn't just a politician, he was a fixture of the city. He had been the mayor for 2 terms, and before that, a councilman. Tiffany had spent months trying to get into his inner circle, donating money she stole from Marcus to his re-election campaign, attending every gala. Getting him here tonight was her crowning achievement. It was her validation. Tiffany let out a gasp of pure delight. She rushed forward, abandoning her parents, abandoning her husband. "Mr. Mayor," she exclaimed, extending her hands. "We are so honored. Thank you for coming to celebrate our little miracle." Mayor Franklin smiled, the practiced smile of a politician. "Tiffany, you look radiant," he said. "Congratulations to you and Marcus. A child is a blessing for the city." He shook her hand, then Marcus's hand. Richard Worthington tried to push his way in, eager to rub elbows with power, but the mayor was already looking past them. He was scanning the room. He wasn't looking for the bar. He wasn't looking for the buffet. He was looking for someone. His eyes swept over the crowd of socialites and climbers. He frowned slightly. Then his gaze landed on the back corner, on the small wobbly table by the kitchen door. On me. His face lit up. It was a genuine expression, not the political mask he wore for Tiffany. He stepped around Tiffany, ignoring her attempt to guide him toward the VIP lounge. He walked straight through the crowd. The guests parted like the Red Sea, confused, turning to see where the most powerful man in Atlanta was going. He walked right up to my table. He didn't look at my wrinkled suit. He didn't look at the service door swinging open next to me. He looked me in the eye. He bowed. It wasn't a deep bow, but it was a clear sign of deference, a sign of respect from one powerful man to another. Chairman Jenkins, the mayor, said, his voice booming in the quiet room. "I didn't see your name on the guest list, but I hoped you would be here." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. Tiffany stood frozen in the center of the foyer, her mouth open. Richard Worthington looked like he was having a stroke. "Mr. Mayor," I said, not standing up. "It is good to see you. I wanted to tell you personally," the mayor continued, ignoring the 100 pairs of eyes staring at us. "The Southside Library project is finished. The final inspection was this morning. We wouldn't have broken ground without your donation, Otis. That check, it saved the literacy program for the entire district." Donation. The word hung in the air. Tiffany's face went from confused to pale. She knew I didn't have money for a donation. She knew I was destitute. She knew I was a leech. "Donation," Tiffany squeaked. Her voice was high and thin. "Mr. Mayor, I think you are confused. That is just Pops. He is retired." The mayor turned slowly to look at Tiffany. His expression cooled. "Retired." He laughed. "Tiffany, your father-in-law is the silent chair of the Transit Union Pension Fund. He is the reason half the cargo in this state moves on time. And he is the most generous philanthropist this city has seen in a decade. He just doesn't like to put his name on buildings." The room started to murmur. Whispers of chairman and philanthropist buzzed like angry bees. People were looking at me differently now. The disgust was gone, replaced by curiosity and calculation. Tiffany looked at me. Her eyes were wide, panicked. She looked at her mother. Karen looked like she was going to faint. I stood up slowly. I brushed a crumb off my lapel. I looked at the mayor and then I winked at Tiffany. "I think you are mistaken, Mr. Mayor," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "I am just an old man. I live in the garage. I spill coffee on modems. I am just the gardener here." The mayor looked confused. He looked at my wrinkled suit, then at the table by the kitchen, and then back at Tiffany. He was a smart man. He saw the setup. He saw the segregation. His eyes narrowed. "The gardener," he repeated, his voice cold. "I see." He turned his back on Tiffany completely. He pulled out a chair at my wobbly little table and sat down. "Well, Otis," he said, "if you are sitting here, then I am sitting here. I want to hear about your roses." Tiffany looked like she had been slapped. The mayor of Atlanta was sitting at the kids' table with the man she had locked in a freezer the night before. Her perfect party was tilting on its axis. She looked at Marcus, desperate for him to fix it, to explain, to do something. But Marcus was just standing there smiling. Tiffany rallied. She had to. She was a survivor, a cockroach in couture. She grabbed a glass of champagne and marched to the center of the room. She signaled the band to stop playing. She tapped a spoon against the glass. "Ding, ding, ding, everyone please," she shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "We have so much to celebrate. The mayor is just joking with Pops. He has such a great sense of humor." She glared at me, daring me to contradict her. "But we have big news," she continued. "Not only are we welcoming a new baby, but tonight we are securing his future. Pops has graciously decided to gift his property to us to ensure that the Jenkins legacy lives on." She waved a hand at the notary she had hired, who was standing by a table with a stack of documents. "Otis," she called out, her voice hard. "Come up here. It is time to sign." She was trying to regain control. She was trying to bulldoze through the awkwardness and get the ink on the paper before anyone asked any more questions about why the philanthropist was sleeping in the garage. I looked at the mayor. "Excuse me, Franklin," I said. "I have to go sign my life away." The mayor looked at me with deep concern. "Otis, if you are being coerced." "Watch the show, Franklin," I whispered. "Just watch the show." I walked toward the front of the room. The crowd parted for me again, but this time there was respect in their eyes. They were confused, but they sensed power. I walked up to the table with the documents. Tiffany shoved a pen into my hand. Her hand was sweating. "Sign it," she hissed in my ear. "Sign it now, or I swear to God I will burn this house down with you in it." I looked at the papers, the deed transfer, the power of attorney, the will. It was all there, the complete dismantling of my life. I looked at the crowd. I saw Richard and Karen Worthington standing in the front row, greedy anticipation written all over their faces. I saw the fake friends. I saw the mayor watching intently. And I saw Marcus standing by the large projection screen that had been set up for a slideshow of family memories. He was holding a remote control. I took the pen. I held it over the paper. Tiffany held her breath. "Actually," I said, my voice booming in the silence, "before I sign, I think we should watch a video, a tribute, to the happy couple." Tiffany frowned. "A video?" "We didn't plan a video. Marcus planned it," I said, "as a surprise." Tiffany looked at Marcus. He smiled at her. It was a dazzling smile. "Just a little something to show how much I love you, honey," Marcus said. Tiffany relaxed. She preened. She loved tributes. She loved being worshipped. "Oh, Marcus," she gushed. "Go ahead. Play it." Marcus pointed the remote at the screen. The lights in the room dimmed. The projector hummed to life. A giant image appeared on the screen. It wasn't a wedding photo. It wasn't a picture of a baby ultrasound. It was a time-stamped security feed from 2 nights ago. High definition. Crisp audio. It showed the living room. It showed the Christmas tree. It showed the bar cart. And it showed Tiffany clear as day pulling a packet of white powder from her bra and dumping it into my wine glass. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the air. On the screen, Tiffany stirred the wine with her finger, wiped it on her dress, and looked at her mother. "Make sure he drinks it all," the Tiffany on the screen said. "We need him out of here tonight." Tiffany in the room dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, echoing the crash from 2 nights ago. "What is this?" she screamed. "Turn it off, Marcus. Turn it off." But Marcus didn't turn it off. He pressed a button and the video changed. Now it was me shivering in the garage, curled up on a mattress with no blankets, my breath fogging in the freezing air. The audio played my voice whispering for water, whispering for mercy. Another gasp from the crowd. Someone murmured, "Oh my God." The mayor stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. Tiffany lunged for Marcus, trying to grab the remote. "You bastard, stop it!" Marcus caught her wrist. He didn't look like a husband anymore. He looked like a judge. "I am not stopping, Tiffany," he said. "We are just getting to the good part." He clicked the remote again. The screen changed. This time, it wasn't a security feed. It was the video Ray had given me. The boutique hotel, the black BMW, Trent getting out of the car, Tiffany running into his arms, the kiss, the desperate, hungry, adulterous kiss. The room erupted. People were shouting. Richard Worthington looked like he was going to be sick. And then the audio from the restaurant played over the speakers loud and clear. "Old man is going to sign the house over tomorrow." Tiffany's voice laughed. "I will file for divorce the day the check clears. Cite financial instability, fake abuse evidence." Tiffany stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the wreckage of her lies. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at Marcus. Her face twisted. The mask fell off completely. She didn't look beautiful anymore. She looked feral. "You set me up," she screamed at Marcus. "You set me up." Marcus looked at her calm and cold. "No, Tiffany," he said. "You set yourself up. I just turned on the lights." He looked at me. "Your turn, Pops." I dropped the pen on the table. It rolled across the unsigned deed. I looked at Tiffany. I looked at her parents. "You wanted a signing," I said. "You wanted a show. Well, here it is." I reached into my jacket pocket, but I didn't pull out a checkbook. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This isn't a deed," I said. I unfolded it and held it up. "This is an eviction notice," I said. "For this house. For the boutique. For everything. Because Tiffany, you don't own any of it. And as of this morning, neither does Marcus." I turned to the crowd. "My name is Otis Jenkins. I own the mortgage on this estate. I own the building where Tiffany's shop is located. And I own the debt her parents are drowning in." I looked at the Worthingtons. "And I am calling it all in. Tonight." The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and final. It was the sound of a guillotine blade falling, and it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The room was spinning in a vortex of murmurs and gasps, but Tiffany stood in the center of the storm, refusing to bend. She looked at the image of herself kissing Trent on the screen, then she looked at the crowd of Atlanta's elite, and she laughed. It was a brittle, jagged sound like glass breaking in a garbage disposal. "That is fake," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "You manipulated that video. You used AI. Everyone knows you can do anything with computers these days. You are trying to frame me because you are jealous. You are insecure because I am the one holding this family together while your business fails." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wild, pleading for an ally. "He is abusive," she shouted, tears instantly springing to her eyes in a performance worthy of an Oscar. "He has been controlling me for months. He made that video to humiliate me because he knows I am carrying his child and he doesn't want to pay for it. He is trying to get out of his responsibilities." Richard Worthington stepped forward, his face purple with rage. He saw his golden goose about to be cooked, and he wasn't going to let that happen. He grabbed Marcus by the lapel of his tuxedo. "You sick son of a bitch," Richard spat, spraying saliva. "You doctor footage of my daughter. On the night she announces your heir, I will sue you into the ground. I will take every dime you have." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't shove Richard back. He just looked at the older man's hand on his jacket with an expression of mild distaste, as if a slug had crawled onto him. He gently, firmly removed Richard's hand and dropped it. "You can't take what isn't there," Richard Marcus said calmly. "And you definitely can't sue with money you don't have." Karen Worthington rushed to Tiffany, wrapping her arms around her daughter. They stood there, a tableau of victimhood, two women against the cruel world. "Ignore him, Tiffany," Karen hissed loud enough for the front row to hear. "He is just like his father, bitter, low class. They don't understand how people like us live. Get the signature, honey. Get the house. Once the paper is signed, none of this slander matters. We will deal with the divorce later." Tiffany's eyes snapped to me. The house. The $800,000 lifeline. She realized that if she could just get my ink on that deed, she still won. She could weather the scandal of the affair if she had the capital to run away. She lunged at the table, grabbing the pen that had rolled away. She shoved the deed toward me, her fingernails scratching against the paper. "Sign it, Otis," she commanded, her voice dropping the sweet act entirely. "Sign it right now. Do it for the baby. Do it because if you don't, I swear I will make sure the stress causes a miscarriage. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want to be the reason your grandson dies before he is born?" The crowd gasped. Even for her, that was low. Using the life of an unborn child as a bargaining chip in a property dispute was a level of depravity that shocked even the most cynical socialites in the room. I looked at her. I looked at the pen. I looked at the mayor, who was standing with his arms crossed, watching the proceedings with the cold eye of a prosecutor. I picked up the pen. Tiffany let out a breath, a sound of triumphant relief. She thought she had me. She thought I was weak enough to crumble under the guilt. But before the tip of the pen could touch the paper, the screen behind us flickered again. Marcus had moved back to the laptop. He tapped the microphone, the sound echoing through the banquet hall, silencing the murmurs instantly. "Before my father signs," Marcus said, his voice booming, "I think there is one more memory we need to share. We have seen the love affair. Now let's see the family dynamics." Tiffany froze. "No," she whispered. "No more. This is from Christmas Eve." Marcus continued, ignoring her. "Just yesterday, a night for family, a night for peace." The video began to play. It was the footage from the living room security camera. It was crystal clear. It showed the party in full swing. It showed me sitting in the corner in my wingback chair. And it showed Tiffany at the bar cart. The angle was perfect. You could see her reach into her brassiere. You could see the small paper packet. You could see her pour the white powder into the glass of red wine. You could see the look on her face, a sneer of pure, unfiltered hatred as she swirled the glass to dissolve the drug. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. On the screen, Tiffany handed the glass to her mother, Karen. You could see lips moving. The subtitles Marcus had added appeared on the bottom of the screen. "Make sure he drinks it all. We need him out of here tonight." Karen Worthington let out a strangled cry in the banquet hall. She tried to cover the screen with her body, but the image was projected 10 feet high. There was no hiding it. Then the video showed Marcus. It showed him walking to the cart while Tiffany greeted the mayor. It showed the switch, smooth, fast, the justice of it. Then it cut to 20 minutes later. Tiffany clutching her stomach. Tiffany running to the bathroom, the paramedics wheeling her out. The video froze on a close-up of Tiffany's face as she was loaded onto the stretcher, pale, sweating, terrified of the very poison she had intended for me. Marcus walked out from behind the podium. He walked slowly toward his wife. The crowd parted for him. He looked like a titan. He stopped 3 feet from her. Tiffany was shaking. She wasn't acting anymore. This was real fear. She looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then at the mayor. She realized there was no lie she could spin that would cover this. This wasn't AI. This wasn't a deep fake. This was her soul laid bare in 4K resolution. "You tried to poison him," Marcus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to the back of the room. "You tried to drug my 73-year-old father on Christmas Eve because you didn't want him in your house. You wanted him in a nursing home so bad you were willing to induce a medical emergency to get him there." It was just a sedative," Tiffany stammered, backing away until she hit the table. "It was just to make him sleep. He is annoying, Marcus. He embarrasses us. I just wanted him to sleep." "So, you admit it," the mayor boomed from his seat. Tiffany clamped her hand over her mouth, realizing she had just confessed to a felony in front of the highest elected official in the city. Marcus stepped closer. He picked up the deed from the table. He picked up the pen I had dropped. "You wanted the house so much," Marcus said softly. "You schemed for it. You slept with my best friend for it. You stole from my company for it. And you tried to hurt my father for it." He ripped the deed in half. The sound was like a gunshot. He ripped it again and again until the paper was nothing but confetti falling to the floor. "Do you want the poison or do you want the house?" Tiffany Marcus asked. His eyes were dark voids. "You chose both. You tried to take everything. But you forgot who you were dealing with. You forgot that I am his son." He pointed at me. "You thought he was a weak old man. You didn't know he was the one feeding you. You didn't know he was the one paying for this party. You didn't know he was the one keeping the lights on in that store you used to launder my money." Tiffany fell to her knees. It wasn't a theatrical fall this time. Her legs just gave out. She looked up at Marcus, mascara running down her face, her hands clutching the skirt of her expensive dress. "Marcus, please," she sobbed. "The baby. Think of the baby. The stress. You are hurting the baby." Marcus looked down at her. He looked at her stomach. There was no love in his eyes. There was no pity. There was only the cold, clinical detachment of a man looking at a tumor he had just cut out. "There is no baby." "Tiffany," he said. The room gasped again. They couldn't take much more. "I had a vasectomy a year ago," Marcus said. "I have the medical records. I have the follow-up tests. I am sterile." He reached into his pocket and pulled out another piece of paper. He dropped it on her head. It fluttered down to the floor beside her knees. "And I have the report from the private investigator," he continued. "Dr. Evans. The $5,000 bribe. The fake ultrasound. We know Tiffany. We know you tied your tubes 3 years ago. We know there is no child. There never was. There is just you and your greed and a hole where your heart should be." Tiffany made a sound like a wounded animal. She curled into a ball on the floor, hiding her face from the lights, from the cameras, from the judgment of the crowd. Karen Worthington tried to step forward to defend her daughter, to spin one last lie, but Richard grabbed her arm. His face was gray. He knew it was over. He knew the money was gone. He knew the ride had ended. He looked at me standing there in my wrinkled suit, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. He realized he hadn't been mocking a pauper. He had been mocking the executioner. Marcus turned to the crowd. "Please finish the champagne," he said. "My father paid for it. It is excellent vintage. But the party is over. And so is my marriage." He walked over to me. He put his arm around my shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I felt the tremors in his body, the release of 2 years of held breath. I looked at the mayor. He was on his phone, speaking rapidly in a low voice. He looked up, caught my eye, and nodded. He was calling the district attorney. I looked down at Tiffany, sobbing on the floor among the torn pieces of the deed. "You wanted a signing," I said to the top of her head. "You wanted a legacy. Well, you got one. This video is going to be your legacy. This moment is going to be what people remember when they hear the name Jenkins. Not the house, not the money, but the night you tried to poison a good man and got served a plate of cold, hard justice." I turned to Marcus. "Let's go, son," I said. "The air in here is bad for my health." We walked toward the door, leaving the ruins of the Worthington family behind us. But we weren't done. Not yet. We still had the business with Trent. We still had the embezzlement charges. We still had the eviction. This was just the appetizer. The main course was yet to come. And I was starving. The room was spinning in a vortex of murmurs and gasps, but Tiffany stood in the center of the storm, refusing to bend. She looked at the image of herself on the screen, putting the powder in the wine, and then she looked at the crowd of Atlanta's elite, and she laughed. It was a brittle, jagged sound like glass breaking in a garbage disposal. "That is fake," she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "You manipulated that video. You used AI. Everyone knows you can do anything with computers these days. You are trying to frame me because you are jealous. You are insecure because I am the one holding this family together while your business fails." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wild, pleading for an ally. "He is abusive," she shouted, tears instantly springing to her eyes in a performance worthy of an Oscar. "He has been controlling me for months. He made that video to humiliate me because he knows I am carrying his child and he does not want to pay for it. He is trying to get out of his responsibilities." She grabbed her stomach again, cradling the phantom infant with both hands. "My baby," she sobbed. "My poor, innocent baby. Marcus wants to kill it. He told me he would rather see me dead than share his money with a child. That is why he made that fake video. To justify cutting me off. To justify leaving his pregnant wife destitute." The crowd wavered. A few people looked at Marcus with uncertainty. The accusation was heavy. Abuse. Abandonment. It was the kind of mud that sticks even if it is not true. Marcus stood like a stone wall. He did not defend himself. He did not shout back. He just looked at me. It was my turn to close the trap. I stepped forward. My shoes clicked on the polished floor. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. It was not a prop. It was a medical file. "You say there is a baby Tiffany?" I asked, my voice calm and low. "You say Marcus is the father?" "Yes," she shrieked. "Of course he is the father. Who else would it be? We are trying to build a family and you are trying to destroy it, you jealous old man." I opened the envelope. I pulled out a document with a blue medical seal. I walked over to the mayor, who was still sitting at the small table by the kitchen. "Mr. Mayor," I said, "you are a man of the law. Can you verify this document for the room?" The mayor took the paper. He put on his reading glasses. He read it silently, and then he looked up at Tiffany. His face was grim. "It is a surgical record," he announced, his voice carrying to the back of the room. "Dated November 12th of last year. Patient name, Marcus Jenkins. Procedure vasectomy. Attending physician, Dr. Arrington. Post-operative analysis confirms 0 sperm count." The room went silent again. This time it was the silence of a tomb. I took the paper back from the mayor. I held it up. "My son has been sterile for over a year," I said. "I drove him to the clinic myself. I sat in the waiting room, I paid the bill. So unless this is a divine conception, Tiffany, there is no baby. Or if there is a baby, it does not belong to a Jenkins." Tiffany's face went white. She opened and closed her mouth like a fish on a dock. She looked at Marcus, but he was looking at the floor, shaking his head slowly. "The test," Dr. Evans said. She stammered. "Dr. Evans," I interrupted, pulling out another paper. "You mean the man you paid $5,000 cash to in the parking lot of the Lexus dealership yesterday? The man whose gambling debts are almost as big as your father's?" I threw the photo of her handing the envelope to the doctor onto the floor at her feet. "We know, Tiffany," I said. "We know you tied your tubes 3 years ago. We have those records too. We know there is no baby. We know it was just a ploy to get the house, to get the money." She backed away, shaking her head violently. No, that is a lie. You are forging documents now. You are all crazy." She looked at her parents. "Mom, Dad, help me. They are lying. They are trying to steal my future." Richard and Karen Worthington stood by the buffet table. They looked like statues. They were calculating. I could see the wheels turning in Richard's head. The house was gone, the money was gone, the reputation was gone, and now the baby, the golden ticket, was gone too. But I wasn't done. "There is one more thing," I said. Marcus nodded at the tech guy running the projector. The screen flickered. The image of the living room disappeared. It was replaced by a new video. It was the footage Ray had given me, the boutique hotel, the black BMW. The crowd watched mesmerized as Trent, Marcus's best friend and business partner, got out of the car. They watched Tiffany run to him. They watched the kiss. It wasn't a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a kiss that devoured. It was a kiss that spoke of long nights and secret meetings. Then the audio kicked in. "Old man is going to sign the house over tomorrow." Tiffany's voice laughed on the speakers. "I will file for divorce the day the check clears. Cite financial instability, fake abuse evidence. I will get full custody of the imaginary baby and a massive settlement." The video cut to Trent laughing. "Poor Marcus. He really thinks he is a businessman. He never even noticed I was cooking the books alongside you." The video ended. The screen went black. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Tiffany screamed. It was a sound of pure primal rage. She lunged at the screen as if she could tear the images down with her bare hands. "You illegal spy," she screeched, turning on me. "You filmed me. That is illegal. You can't use that. It is perfectly legal in a public place," I said. "And it is perfectly legal when it proves a conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion." She looked around the room. She saw the disgust on every face. She saw her friends, the women she had shopped with, turning their backs on her. She saw the mayor whispering to his security detail. She ran to her parents. She grabbed her mother's arm. "Mom, we have to go," she sobbed. "We have to leave. They are crazy. We need to call a lawyer. We need to sue them for defamation." But Karen Worthington did not hug her daughter. She did not comfort her. She pulled her arm away as if Tiffany were contagious. Karen smoothed the front of her dress. She looked at the mayor, who was watching them with cold judgment. She looked at the crowd of wealthy, influential people who were now judging her entire bloodline. She made a choice. It was the choice of a parasite that realizes the host is dying and needs to find a new one. "Get away from me," Karen hissed. Her voice was loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. Tiffany froze. "Mom, do not call me Mom," Karen said, her voice rising in pitch. "I raised you better than this. I raised you to be a lady, and look at you, poisoning old men, faking pregnancies, sleeping with your husband's partner. You are disgusting." Tiffany recoiled as if slapped. "Mom, what are you doing? We are in this together. You told me to—" "I told you nothing," Karen shouted, interrupting her. "Do not try to drag me into your mess, Tiffany. I knew nothing about this. Your father and I have been victims of your lies just as much as Marcus. Richard Worthington stepped up beside his wife. He adjusted his tie, trying to look dignified despite the lobster bisque stains still visible on his back. She is right, he announced, addressing the room more than his daughter. We had no idea. We are shocked, appalled. We thought she was pregnant. We thought she was a devoted wife. We are good Christian people. We do not condone this filth. He looked at me with a pleading expression, trying to salvage his social standing. Mr. Jenkins, surely you can see that we were duped, Richard said, his voice oily. We are victims here. Our daughter has clearly suffered a mental break. She needs help, but we cannot be held responsible for her actions. I looked at them. I looked at Tiffany standing alone in the center of the room, rejected by her husband, exposed by her father-in-law, and now abandoned by her own parents. She looked small, she looked broken, but I felt no pity. Because I remembered the conversation in the kitchen. I remembered Karen telling Tiffany to make sure I drank the poison. I remembered Richard calculating how much my house was worth. They were rats, and when the ship sinks, the rats turn on each other. You are lying, Richard, I said, my voice cutting through his performance. I have the recordings of you in my kitchen. I have the recordings of Karen telling her to use the diet pill excuse. You are not victims. You are the architects. Richard's face turned purple. How dare you, he sputtered. I am a respected member of this community. You are a broke gambler who owes $50,000 to a bookie in Vegas, I said. The crowd gasped again. Richard deflated. Tiffany looked at her parents. Her eyes were wide with betrayal. You cowards, she whispered. You told me to do it. You told me to get the money. You said you needed it for the mortgage. You said if I didn't get the money, you would lose everything. She turned to the crowd, shouting now. They made me do it. They needed the cash. They spent everything. They told me to marry Marcus because he was an easy mark. They told me to get rid of the old man because he was in the way. Shut up, Karen screamed, lunging at her daughter. Shut your mouth, you stupid girl. She slapped Tiffany. It was a hard, sharp crack that echoed in the hall. Tiffany stumbled back, holding her cheek. She looked at her mother with pure hatred. You hit me, she said softly. I will do more than hit you if you don't stop lying, Karen shrieked. You are dead to us. Do you hear me? Dead. We have no daughter. It was a spectacle, a grotesque display of greed eating itself alive. The family that had walked in here with their noses in the air was now tearing each other apart in the mud. I looked at Marcus. He was watching them with a look of profound sadness. He had wanted a family so badly. He had wanted to belong, and this was what he had bought with his love and his money, a nest of vipers. But he was free now. The illusion was gone. I walked over to him. I put a hand on his shoulder. It is done, son, I said. They have destroyed themselves. Marcus nodded. He looked at Tiffany, who was now screaming insults at her father, while Richard tried to physically drag Karen away from the scene. Get them out of here, Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. Get them all out. I signaled to the security guards I had hired. They had been waiting in the wings disguised as waiters. They stepped forward, big men in black suits. Please escort the Worthington family out, I said, and make sure they don't take any of the silverware. As the guards moved in, Tiffany turned to me one last time. Her face was a mask of ruined mascara and red blotches. You think you won, she spat. You think you are smart, but you are still just a lonely old man. You have nothing. I looked at her. I looked at the son standing beside me. I looked at the mayor, who was shaking his head in disgust at the Worthingtons. I looked at the text message on my phone from my lawyer confirming that the purchase of her boutique building was complete. I have my son, I said. I have my dignity. And I have the deed to the building you work in. Her eyes widened. What? I bought it this morning, I said. Consider your lease canceled. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. She opened her mouth to scream again, but the guard took her by the arm. Let's go, ma'am, he said. They dragged her out, kicking and screaming, followed by her parents, who were still loudly proclaiming their innocence and threatening to sue everyone in the room. The door slammed shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was clean. The poison was gone. I looked at the crowd. I am sorry for the interruption, I said. Please enjoy the food. It is paid for. Then I turned to my son. Come on, Marcus, I said. Let's go home. We have a lot of work to do. But before we could move, the mayor stood up. He clapped. Just once. Then again. And suddenly the whole room was applauding. They weren't applauding the drama. They were applauding the truth. They were applauding a father protecting his son. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because the war wasn't over yet. We had won the battle, but now we had to rebuild the kingdom. and the first step was dealing with the financial wreckage Tiffany had left behind. But as I looked at Marcus standing tall and free for the first time in years, I knew we would be all right. We were Jenkins men. We built things, and we were going to build something better than this. "Wait!" Tiffany screamed. It was a sound that tore through the banquet hall, raw and desperate, like metal shearing against stone. She jerked her arm violently, breaking the grip of the security guard who had been escorting her toward the exit. She stumbled back into the center of the room, her chest heaving, her eyes wild and darting. She wasn't done. She wasn't ready to go into the dark. She was a narcissist facing extinction, and she was going to claw at the edges of the abyss until her fingernails broke. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, smoothing her disheveled hair with trembling hands. She looked at Marcus, then at me, her eyes burning with a manic light. "You think you have won because you proved I am not pregnant. You think you won because you exposed Trent. Fine. You got me on the marriage. You got me on the house." She straightened her spine. It was a pathetic attempt at dignity, surrounded as she was by the wreckage of her own lies, but I had to admire her tenacity. She was a cockroach. You could step on her, but she just kept scuttling. "But you can't leave me with nothing," she spat. "I am a business owner. I built Tiffany Couture from the ground up. I have inventory. I have intellectual property. I have shares." She turned to the crowd, looking for anyone who would listen, anyone who still saw her as the successful entrepreneur she pretended to be. "I still have my company," she announced, her voice gaining strength. "I have assets that have nothing to do with the Jenkins family. I will rebuild. I will sue you for distress, and I will use my own money to do it. You can kick me out of this house, Otis, but you can't touch my business. That is mine. My name is on the door." I looked at Marcus. He was standing by the projector, his face impassive. He knew. We had discussed this over lukewarm coffee in his office while she was out shopping. He knew exactly how deep the rot went. I stepped forward. The crowd hushed. They sensed the kill. They knew this wasn't over. "Your business," I repeated. My voice was calm, conversational. "The boutique on Peachtree Street. The warehouse in Decatur. The line of credit with City National." "Yes," she hissed. "My empire. You can't touch it. It is an LLC. It is protected." I shook my head slowly. I felt a twinge of pity for her, but it was the kind of pity you feel for a rabid dog that needs to be put down. It wasn't mercy. It was just an acknowledgement of the tragedy of her existence. "You really don't pay attention to the details, do you, Tiffany?" I said. "You were so busy spending money you never bothered to check where it was coming from or who owned the paper you were signing." I raised my hand and signaled toward the back of the room. "Rosen," I said. A man stepped out from the shadows near the kitchen entrance. He was small, neat, and terrifyingly efficient. He wore a suit that cost more than Tiffany's car, and he carried a leather briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. It was my lawyer, Rosen, the man who managed the wealth I never spoke about. He walked into the circle of light. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Tiffany. He adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Jenkins Rosen said," his voice was dry as dust. "Or do you prefer Ms. Worthington? It doesn't matter for the purposes of this conversation." "Who are you?" Tiffany demanded, taking a step back. "I don't know you." "My name is Arthur Rosen," he said. "I am the senior counsel for Jenkins Holdings." Tiffany frowned. "Jenkins Holdings? Marcus doesn't have a holding company." "No," Rosen said. "Marcus doesn't. Mr. Otis Jenkins does." The room rippled with whispers. Otis Jenkins, the gardener, the truck driver, the man with a holding company. Rosen opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of documents bound in blue legal covers. "Regarding your company, Tiffany Couture LLC," Rosen began reading from the top sheet. "You mentioned shares. You mentioned assets. I am afraid there has been a significant restructuring of your liabilities in the last 24 hours. "What are you talking about?" Tiffany's voice wavered. 3 months ago, you took out a high-risk operating loan to cover your vendor debts in Italy, Rosen said. You used your inventory as collateral. When you defaulted last month, which you did because you spent the operating capital on a trip to Cabo, the debt was sold. I was going to pay that," she stammered. "I just needed the house money to clear it." "The debt was purchased this morning," Rosen continued, ignoring her, "by a subsidiary of Jenkins Holdings. We immediately exercised the default clause." He handed her a piece of paper. She stared at it, her hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "This means," Rosen said, looking over his spectacles, "that we have seized the inventory. The dresses, the fabrics, the sewing machines. They are currently being loaded onto trucks as we speak." "No," she whispered. "You can't." But there is more, Rosen said. He pulled out another document. The lease on your storefront. You were 3 months behind. The landlord was preparing to evict. However, he received a cash offer for the building this morning, above market value. He sold. Tiffany looked up. Her eyes were wide, white circles of panic. Who, she asked. Rosen gestured to me. Mr. Jenkins is now the owner of the building at 4402 Peachtree, Rosen said. He has chosen to terminate all existing commercial leases effective immediately for renovations. You have until midnight to vacate the premises. Tiffany dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, joining the torn deed and the photo of the doctor. My store, she choked out. My clothes. Our property of Jenkins Holdings, Rosen said, to satisfy the outstanding debt. He wasn't done. He reached into the briefcase one last time. And finally the brand trademark, he said. You registered it personally, which was a mistake. When you signed the personal guarantee for the business loan, the one you didn't read because you were in a hurry to get to happy hour, you put up all personal intellectual property as secondary collateral. He closed the briefcase with a snap. Mr. Jenkins now owns the name Tiffany Couture, Rosen said. He also owns the website domain, the client list, and the social media accounts. I believe he intends to shut them down. Or perhaps rebrand. I hear he has always liked the name Betty's Bargains. I smiled. Betty would have liked that. Tiffany looked at me. She looked at Marcus. She looked at her parents, who were cowering by the door, trying to make themselves invisible. She realized the full extent of the devastation. She wasn't just divorced. She wasn't just homeless. She was erased. Her identity, her status, her name, it was all gone. She stumbled back. Her legs hit a chair, one of the gold Chiavari chairs she had insisted on renting for the party because the standard ones weren't elegant enough. She collapsed into it, her legs giving way. She sat there slumped, her expensive dress pooling around her like a shroud. She looked up at me. Her face was a mask of shock. You took everything, she whispered. You took my business. You took my name. I walked over to her. I stood over her, looking down. I didn't take anything that wasn't paid for with my son's stolen money, I said. She gripped the arms of the gold chair. Her knuckles were white. At least I am still me, she mumbled, trying to find some scrap of ground to stand on. I am still sitting here. I am still a Worthington. I looked at the chair she was sitting in. I looked at the table. I looked at the crystal glass she had dropped earlier. Actually, I said. I leaned in close. The room was silent. Everyone wanted to hear the final blow. You don't own anything, Tiffany. I tapped the back of the gold chair with my finger. Even this chair you are sitting on, I said. I just bought it. She blinked. What? The rental company, I said. Event Lux Rentals. You didn't pay the deposit. You forged the receipt. The owner called the police an hour ago. He was on his way here to repossess everything. The tables, the linens, the chairs. I stood up straight. I stopped him at the gate, I said. I wrote him a check. I bought the contract. Because I didn't want my guests standing up while they watched you fall. I gestured to the room. Everything here is mine, Tiffany. The chair under your bottom, the glass on the floor, the food in the kitchen, even the air conditioning you are sweating in. It is all paid for by Otis Jenkins. I looked at the security guards. Get her out of my chair, I said. 2 guards stepped forward. Tiffany scrambled up, terrified they would touch her. She backed away, tripping over her own dress. You are the devil, she screamed. You are a monster. I am a father, I said, and you messed with the wrong child. She looked at her parents. Mom, Dad, do something. He took my company. He took my brand. Richard Worthington looked at the floor. He looked at the ceiling. He looked anywhere but at his daughter. He knew the score. He knew that if he spoke up, he might be next. He was a survivor, and survivors don't hitch their wagons to corpses. Let's go, Tiffany. Karen said, her voice hollow. Just, let's go. Tiffany looked at them with pure betrayal. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus, please, she sobbed. I built that company. It is my life. It was built on fraud, Marcus said. It was built on theft. And now it is closed. The guards took her arms. This time she didn't fight. The fight had gone out of her. She wilted. She let them drag her toward the door, her feet dragging on the marble floor she had been so proud of. As they reached the threshold, I called out, "One more thing." The guard stopped. Tiffany turned her head, her eyes dull and hopeless. "Rosen," I said, "give her the bill." Rosen walked over and tucked a piece of paper into the sash of her dress. "What is this?" she whispered. "Tax liability," Rosen said cheerfully. "Since you were the sole proprietor of the LLC, you are personally responsible for the back taxes. And since Mr. Jenkins acquired the assets but not the personal tax burden, you owe the IRS about $40,000. Good luck with the audit." She screamed then, a long, wailing sound of total defeat. The guards dragged her out into the night, her parents trailing behind her like ghosts. The door slammed shut. I looked at the chair she had vacated. It was empty. It was gold. And it was mine. I looked at Marcus. He let out a long, shaky breath. He ran a hand through his hair. "You bought the rental company?" He asked, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I bought the contract," I corrected. I didn't want the party to stop just because she couldn't pay the bill. I turned to the guests. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They had come to see a baby announcement. They had witnessed an execution. "Please," I said, adjusting my cuffs. "Continue with dinner. The lobster bisque is excellent. And if anyone needs financial advice, Mr. Rosen is available for consultations." A nervous laughter rippled through the room. The tension broke. The music started up again. I walked over to Marcus. "You okay?" I asked. He looked at the door. He looked at the empty space where his wife used to be. "I will be," he said. He looked at me. "You really own her brand name?" I nodded. "What are you going to do with it?" I smiled. "I was thinking of giving it to the Salvation Army," I said. "They do good work. Maybe they can use the old inventory for rags." Marcus laughed. It was a real laugh, the first one I had heard in years. "Come on, Pops," he said. "Let's get a drink." "Not wine. Whiskey," I said. "Top shelf," he agreed. We walked toward the bar, leaving the empty gold chair behind us as a monument to the girl who tried to steal a kingdom and lost her own name in the process. The silence that had fallen over the banquet hall was shattered not by a scream, but by a siren. It started as a low wail in the distance, growing louder and more insistent until it drowned out the hum of the refrigerator and the nervous shuffling of the guests. Blue and red lights began to strobe against the high windows, cutting through the warm, golden glow of the chandeliers like knives. The party was officially over. The law had arrived. Tiffany froze. Her hands were still gripping the arms of the empty chair I had evicted her from. She looked at the windows, then at the front door. For the first time all night, she didn't look like a predator. She looked like a trapped rat hearing the snap of the trap. The heavy oak doors burst open. The cold night air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that melted instantly on the marble floor. 4 officers marched in. They weren't the local beat cops who nodded politely at Mayor Franklin. These were detectives. They wore cheap suits and grim expressions. They moved with the heavy, purposeful gait of men who had seen too much evil to be impressed by a crystal chandelier. One of them, a man with a gray buzz cut and eyes like flint, stepped into the center of the foyer. He scanned the room, ignoring the mayor, ignoring the wealthy guests. His eyes landed on Tiffany. "Tiffany Jenkins," he barked. Tiffany straightened up. She tried to summon the ghost of her arrogance, pulling her shoulders back and lifting her chin. It was a pathetic sight, like a queen trying to issue orders from a guillotine. "I am Mrs. Jenkins," she corrected him, her voice trembling but shrill. "And who do you think you are, bursting into my private event? Do you have any idea who is in this room? The mayor is right there. I suggest you show some respect before you lose your pensions." The detective didn't even blink. He walked up to her, stopping just outside of her personal space. He pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. The metal clicked ominously. "I am Detective Miller, Atlanta PD, Elder Abuse and Financial Crimes Division," he said. His voice was flat, bored even. "I am not here for the mayor, Mrs. Jenkins. I am here for you." He reached out and grabbed her wrist. He spun her around with practiced efficiency. Tiffany shrieked a sound of pure indignity. "Get your hands off me," she screamed. "This is assault, Marcus. Marcus, tell them. Tell them who I am." Marcus stood by the projector screen. He didn't move. He watched the detective snap the cuff onto Tiffany's left wrist. Click. Then the right. Click. "You are under arrest," Detective Miller recited, raising his voice over her screaming. "For what?" she wailed, struggling against the metal. "I haven't done anything." "This is a mistake. My father-in-law is confused. He is senile." "You are being charged with 3 counts, Miller said, tightening the cuffs. "Count 1. Aggravated assault with intent to cause bodily harm, specifically the poisoning of Otis Jenkins on December 24th. That is a lie, she yelled, spit flying from her mouth. It was an accident. He mixed up his meds. We have the toxicology report from the glass, Miller said calmly. And we have the video. He continued, ignoring her sputtered denials. Count 2 grand larceny and embezzlement. The theft of over $200,000 from Jenkins Logistics over a period of 18 months. It was my money, she screamed. I am his wife. It is community property. And count 3. Miller said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming harder, angrier. Cruelty to a vulnerable adult and false imprisonment. Specifically, locking a 73-year-old man in an unheated structure in sub-freezing temperatures without food or water for 12 hours. The room gasped again. Hearing it read out like that in the cold language of the law made it sound even worse than seeing it on the screen. It wasn't just mean. It was criminal. It was depraved. Tiffany stopped struggling for a second. She looked at the detective, her eyes wide. How do you know that? She whispered. No one knows that. Otis didn't tell anyone. He couldn't. I took his phone. The detective looked past her. He looked at Marcus. We received a call 2 hours ago, Miller said, from a concerned citizen. He provided us with sworn statements, financial records, and digital video evidence uploaded directly to our server. Tiffany followed the detective's gaze. She looked at her husband. Marcus, she breathed. Her voice was small, broken. You, Marcus stepped forward. He walked until he was standing right in front of her. He looked down at his wife, the woman he had promised to love and cherish, the woman who had turned his life into a crime scene. I called them Tiffany, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the pain vibrating underneath it. You, she gasped. But we are a team. We are partners. We were never partners, Marcus said. I was your mark, and Pops was your victim. He pulled his phone out of his pocket. He turned the screen toward her. It showed the feed from the garage camera, the image of me shivering on the mattress. I watched you, Tiffany, Marcus said softly. I watched it live. Last night, while you were sleeping in our bed dreaming about spending my money, I was watching my father freeze. I wanted to come down there and break the door down. I wanted to kill you. He put the phone away. But Pops told me to wait, he said. He told me to let you dig the hole deep enough so you could never climb out. So I sat there, I watched, and I hit record. I sent that video to the police this morning while you were getting your hair done. You monster, she screamed. She lunged at him, but the detective held her back. You set me up. You let me do it. I didn't make you lock him in there, Marcus said. I didn't make you poison him. I didn't make you sleep with Trent. You did all that on your own. I just provided the lighting. Tiffany's face crumpled. The reality of it finally hit her. There was no way out. The mayor wasn't going to save her. Her parents weren't going to save her. Her lies weren't going to save her. She started to thrash. It was an ugly, animalistic struggle. She kicked at the detective's shins. She threw her head back, howling like a banshee. Her perfectly coiffed hair, which had cost $300 that morning, fell into her face in a tangled mess. Her makeup, waterproof or not, couldn't withstand the torrent of tears and sweat streaming down her skin. Black streaks of mascara ran down her cheeks like war paint. Her lipstick smeared as she bit her lip in fury. She looked deranged. The beautiful, poised socialite was gone. In her place was a creature of pure rage and ugliness. I hate you, she screamed at Marcus. I hate you. You are weak. You are nothing. I should have left you years ago. And you, she turned her wild eyes on me. You old leech. You should have died. Why didn't you just die? It would have been so much easier. I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I looked at her with pity. I am hard to kill, Tiffany, I said. A lot of people have tried. You aren't the first, and you certainly weren't the smartest. The detective yanked her arm, forcing her toward the door. That is enough, Mrs. Jenkins, he said. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it. She fought them every step of the way. Her heels skidded on the marble floor, leaving black scuff marks. Her dress, the white silk gown she had chosen to look angelic, twisted around her legs. She looked like a fallen bride being dragged to hell. As they hauled her past the tables, she looked at the guests. She looked at her friends. Help me, she begged. Brenda. Sarah. Tell them Tell them I am a good person. Brenda and Sarah. Two women who had been drinking her champagne minutes ago turned their backs. They studied the floral arrangements with intense fascination. They didn't know her, not anymore. Tiffany let out a wail of despair. It was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was the sound of a life ending. They dragged her through the open doors and out into the night. The flashing lights of the squad cars washed over her one last time before they shoved her into the back seat. I watched through the open door. I saw her face pressed against the glass as the car pulled away. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. Her eyes were locked on the house she would never set foot in again. The sirens didn't wail this time. They didn't need to. The threat was neutralized. The car drove off silently into the darkness, taking my nightmare with it. I turned back to the room. The silence was heavy. Richard and Karen Worthington were standing by the buffet table looking like ghosts. They were pale, shaking, and utterly silent. They had watched their daughter be dragged away in chains, and they hadn't said a word. They hadn't lifted a finger. Marcus walked over to me. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but he stood straighter. The weight was gone. "She is gone, Pops," he said quietly. "She is gone, son," I agreed. He looked at the door. "Did we go too far?" he asked. "The jail? The charges?" I put my hands on his shoulders. I looked him in the eye. "She tried to kill me, Marcus. Not with a gun, but with cold and poison. She tried to destroy you. She tried to steal your soul. You didn't do this to her. She did it to herself. We just made sure she paid the bill." Marcus nodded slowly. He took a deep breath. "You are right," he said. He turned to look at the Worthingtons. Now he said, his voice hardening, "What do we do about the rest of the trash?" I followed his gaze. Richard and Karen were trying to edge toward the side door, hoping to slip away unnoticed in the aftermath. They looked like rats on a sinking ship looking for a piece of driftwood. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Leave them to me," I said. "I have a little parting gift for them." I walked toward the Worthingtons. The crowd parted again. They knew I was the man in charge now. They knew Otis Jenkins wasn't a gardener. He was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. And I had one more sentence to pass. Richard and Karen Worthington were trying to slide along the wall toward the service exit, moving with the desperate, jerky stealth of cockroaches caught in a sudden beam of light. They kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with the remaining guests, their shoulders hunched as if expecting a physical blow. But they couldn't escape the weight of the room's gaze. Every eye was fixed on them, heavy with judgment and disgust. I watched them for a moment, letting them get almost to the door before I spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of that banquet hall, it cracked like a whip. "Going somewhere, Richard?" I asked. "The party is just getting started for you." Richard froze. He turned slowly, his face a mask of crumbling plaster. He tried to summon his old bluster, that pompous air of superiority he had worn like a shield for decades, but it was gone. It had been stripped away along with his daughter's freedom. We need to call our legal counsel." Richard stammered, smoothing his tie with trembling hands. This is a misunderstanding. We need to help Tiffany. Help her with what I asked," walking toward them. "With money, you don't have any. With influence, you just lost it all." I stopped a few feet away from them. I let the silence stretch, let them stew in their own panic. Around us, the guests, the elite of Atlanta, the bankers, the investors, the people Richard had spent his life trying to impress, were watching with cold, predatory eyes. "Mr. Worthington," a voice cut in from the crowd. It was Leonard Sterling, the president of City National Bank. He stepped forward holding a glass of champagne, looking at Richard with the kind of disdain usually reserved for roadkill. "I am glad I caught you," Sterling said, his voice smooth and icy. "My compliance officer flagged your accounts this morning. It seems the checks you wrote to cover the interest on your bridge loan have bounced. Again." Richard turned a sickly shade of gray. "Leonard, please not here. We can discuss this on Monday. It is just a transfer error." "It is not an error," Sterling said, taking a sip of his drink. "It is a default. And since I see Mr. Jenkins has just acquired the collateral you put up, well, I suppose I will be foreclosing on your personal assets tomorrow, whatever is left of them." Karen let out a small, strangled whimper. She grabbed Richard's arm. "Richard, do something. Tell him." But Richard had nothing to say. He looked around the room, his eyes darting from face to face, looking for a friendly harbor in the storm. He saw none. Mrs. Worthington, another voice chimed in. It was Mrs. Vanderbilt, the chairwoman of the Charity League. Karen had been trying to get into her inner circle for years. I believe you still owe the league for the table you reserved at the gala last month, Mrs. Vanderbilt said, adjusting her pearls. $5,000. You said the check was in the mail. That was 3 weeks ago. Karen shrank back. My husband handles the finances. You are frauds, someone else shouted from the back. It was a local developer. You owe me for the landscaping on your rental property. The dam broke. The room turned on them. It wasn't a mob with pitchforks. It was a mob with ledgers. These were business people. They tolerated many things, but they did not tolerate being stiffed. Suddenly, everyone had a story, a bounced check, a borrowed sum never returned, a promise broken. The Worthingtons hadn't just been leeching off Marcus. They had been grifting their way through the entire social register. You are finished in this town, Richard the mayor said, his voice grave. You have used my name to open doors, and I find out now those doors led to empty vaults. Do not contact my office again. Richard looked like he was shrinking. He seemed to lose 3 inches of height right there on the marble floor. He looked at the hostile crowd, then he looked at Marcus, and finally his desperate, watery eyes landed on me. He realized then that I was the only person in the room who wasn't actively demanding money from him. I was the only lifeline left. Otis Richard pleaded, stepping toward me, his hands clasped together in a begging gesture. Otis, please. We are family. You can't let them do this. We are old people. We have nowhere to go. Karen threw herself into the performance, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Oh, Otis, she wailed. We didn't know Tiffany lied to us, too. She told us you were mean. She told us you hated us. We were just trying to protect our daughter. Please have mercy. We will be on the street. They looked pathetic. Stripped of their arrogance, their lies, and their borrowed finery, they were just 2 scared, greedy people who had gambled everything and lost. I looked at Marcus. He was watching them with a look of pure exhaustion. He didn't hate them anymore. He just wanted them gone. I turned back to Richard. Family, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. You call us family now. When the wolves are at the door, I took a step closer. When you sat at my table and ate my food, you treated me like a servant. When you plotted to put me in a state home to rot, was I family then? When you told my son to sell my house to pay your gambling debts, was I family then? Richard flinched with every question. We were desperate, Otis, he whispered. You have money. You have so much money, you wouldn't even miss it. We just needed a little help. A little help, I said. You stole $200,000 from my son's company. You tried to steal my home. You tried to steal my life. That isn't help, Richard. That is piracy. But we can pay it back, Karen cried. If you just give us a loan, a bridge loan. We have a deal coming through in Miami. It is big, Otis. Huge. We can pay you back double, I laughed. It was a harsh sound. You are still trying to run a con, I said, shaking my head in disbelief. Even now, standing in the wreckage, you are trying to sell me a bridge in Miami. You don't know how to stop, do you? I reached into my pocket. Richard's eyes tracked the movement. A spark of hope lit up in his gaze. He thought I was reaching for a checkbook. He thought, despite everything, the old fool was going to bail him out one last time. I pulled out my hand. I wasn't holding a checkbook. I was holding a single, crisp $1 bill. I held it up to the light. I snapped it between my fingers. You came here tonight to put on a show, I said loudly so everyone could hear. You played the part of the concerned in-laws. You played the part of the wealthy aristocrats. And you played it well, Richard. For a while you almost had me convinced you were actually human beings. I stepped forward and tucked the dollar bill into the breast pocket of his soup-stained jacket. I patted it down. Here, I said. This is for you. Richard looked down at the pocket, confused. What? What is this? It is a tip, I said, cold and hard, for the performance. It was a bad play, and the acting was terrible, but you committed to the role until the very end. Karen stared at the dollar bill as if it were a poisonous spider. $1, she whispered. You have millions, and you give us $1. It is the only dollar you are ever going to get from the Jenkins family again, I said. Keep it. Frame it. Because that is the last asset you have in this world. I turned to the security guards. Show them out, I said. And if they try to come back, call the police and add trespassing to the list of charges. Richard looked at me one last time. The hope was gone. The arrogance was gone. There was only the empty, hollow look of a man who realizes he has dug his own grave and fallen in. You can't do this, he mumbled, but there was no fight left in his voice. I already did, I said. The guards took them by the arms. They didn't drag them like they did Tiffany. They didn't have to. The Worthingtons walked willingly, their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped. They walked past the people they had tried to impress, past the creditors they had tried to cheat, and out into the cold, dark night. I watched them go. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt clean. The house was clean. The company was clean. The parasites were gone. I turned back to the room. The guests were silent, watching me with a new kind of respect. They weren't looking at the gardener anymore. They were looking at the man who cleaned house. I looked at Marcus. He was smiling. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. That was a good tip, Pops, he said softly. Overpaid if you ask me, I replied. We stood there for a moment, just the two of us amidst the ruins of the party. The champagne was warm. The food was cold. But the air was finally breathable. Let's go home, son, I said. Marcus nodded. Yeah, he said. Let's go home. We walked out together, leaving the banquet hall behind us. The war was over. We had won. And tomorrow we would start building something that no one could ever take away from us again. The last catering truck pulled away from the service entrance, its taillights fading into the darkness like red eyes blinking shut. The banquet hall, which hours ago had been a battlefield of screaming voices and shattered glass, was now silent. The hired staff had swept away the confetti of the torn deed. They had cleared the tables of the cold food. The only thing left was the scent of expensive perfume lingering in the air and the two of us standing in the center of the empty room. I walked over to the bar cart, the same one where Tiffany had mixed her poison. I picked up a bottle of aged scotch, the good stuff that Richard Worthington had been eyeing all night but never got to taste. I poured 2 glasses. No ice, no water, just the amber liquid, pure and uncut. I walked over to Marcus. He was sitting on the edge of the stage, his tuxedo jacket discarded on a chair, his tie undone. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon in combat boots. He was staring at the blank projector screen, his mind likely replaying the reel of his wife's betrayal over and over again. I held out the glass. Drink, son, I said. You earned it. Marcus took the glass. He looked at the liquid, swirling it gently. We did it, he whispered. It feels unreal. Yesterday, I was married. Yesterday, I thought I was having a baby. Today you are free. I finished for him. He took a long swallow of the scotch. He grimaced as it burned going down, then let out a sigh. Pops, he said, turning to look at me. His eyes were clear, sharp, intelligent. The fog of Tiffany's manipulation was gone. How did you do it? Not the video. I know how we did that. But the rest, the building, the debt, the contract with the rental company. He gestured around the room. That is millions of dollars, Dad. Liquid cash. Moved in less than 24 hours. I know you have your pension. I know you saved, but that kind of capital, that is institutional money. I took a sip of my drink. It was smooth. It tasted like smoke and history. I walked over and sat next to him on the stage. I looked at my shoes. They were old leather, well cared for, but worn. I never lied to you, Marcus, I said slowly. I was a truck driver. I was a union man. I worked the docks in Baltimore and Savannah. I sweat. I bled. I know, Marcus said softly. I remember. I remember the calluses on your hands. But I didn't just drive, I said. I listened. And I watched. Back in the 80s, the shipping industry was changing. Containerization. Logistics. Everyone was looking at the trucks, but I was looking at the land. I was looking at the ports. I turned to him. When the union pension fund needed to diversify, they asked the senior members for input. Most guys wanted safe bonds. I pushed for infrastructure. I put every dime I had, every cent your mother and I saved, into buying shares of the derelict warehouses around the eastern seaboard, places nobody wanted, swamps, rust buckets. Marcus was listening intently, his glass forgotten in his hand. Then the internet happened, I continued. Global trade exploded. Suddenly everyone needed a place to put their containers. Those swamps became gold mines. I took another sip. I didn't just retire, son. I cashed out my active role, but I kept the equity. I own 30% of the holding company that controls the 3 largest private shipping terminals on the East Coast. Marcus's jaw dropped. 30%. I nodded. Rosen isn't just a lawyer I found in the yellow pages, Marcus. He is the chief counsel for the consortium. He manages the trust. So, Marcus stammered. He looked around the room, then back at me. You are not just comfortable. You are... I am wealthy, I said simply. Very wealthy. Marcus stood up. He walked a few paces away, then turned back. He looked stunned. Not angry, just overwhelmed. Why, he asked. Why live in the old house? Why drive the truck? Why let me worry about you? Why let Tiffany treat you like a beggar? Because of you, I said. I stood up and walked to him. I saw what money did to people, Marcus. I saw it on the docks. I saw men kill their brothers for a payout. I saw families destroyed by greed. I didn't want that for you. I wanted you to build your own muscles. I wanted you to know the value of $1 because you earned it, not because I gave it to you. I touched his chest right over his heart. I wanted you to be a man who could stand on his own 2 feet. And you did. You built your company. You worked hard. You have integrity. If I had given you millions when you were 20, you might have turned into, well, you might have turned into a Worthington. Marcus looked down. He was trembling. But Dad, he choked out. He looked up and his eyes were swimming with tears. You let me treat you like a charity case, he whispered. For years. You let me buy you dinner and feel good about myself while you could have bought the restaurant. I let you be a son, I said. I let you take care of your father. That is a gift, Marcus. It made you proud. But then his face crumpled. The tears spilled over. But the garage, he sobbed. His voice broke ragged and painful. Last night, you slept in the garage, in the freezing cold. You let her lock you in there like a dog. You let her throw your clothes in the snow. He grabbed my shoulders. His grip was desperate. You have millions of dollars and you let my wife treat you like trash. You let me watch it. Why, Dad? Why would you endure that? Because I needed you to see. I said, my own voice thickening with emotion. I needed you to see her. Really see her. Not the mask she wore. Not the pretty face. I needed you to see the monster underneath. I pulled him into a hug. He collapsed against me, weeping like a child. He was a grown man, a CEO, a success, but in that moment he was just my little boy who had gotten lost in the woods. I am so sorry, Marcus wept into my shoulder. I am so sorry I let her do that to you. I am so sorry I didn't protect you. I am so sorry I was so blind. Shh. I soothed him, patting his back. It is okay. It is over. I failed you, he said, pulling back to look at me. His face was wet, his eyes red. I failed you as a son. I let a predator into our house, and I let her hurt you. You didn't fail me, I said firmly. You are not weak, Marcus. You are kind. You are decent. You have a good heart. That is not a weakness. It is a strength. I gripped his shoulders. But kindness without wisdom is dangerous, I said. Tiffany saw your light and she tried to use it to warm herself while she burned your house down. She preyed on your goodness. That is what parasites do. I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. But tonight you grew up. Tonight you stopped being just a good man and you became a dangerous man. You learned how to bite back. I smiled at him. You tricked the trickster's son. You outsmarted the fox. You swapped that wine like a magician. You gathered the evidence. You protected your father. I stepped back and looked him up and down. You didn't fail me, Marcus. You saved me, and you saved yourself. Marcus took a deep breath. He wiped his face with his sleeve, ruining his tuxedo jacket, but he didn't care. I never want to see her again, he said. You won't have to. I promised. Rosen will handle the divorce. He is a shark. By the time he is done with her, she will be lucky if she gets to keep her maiden name. Marcus let out a short, watery laugh. And the Worthingtons, I think they have learned that the Jenkins family is not to be trifled with, I said. We stood there for a moment in the quiet companionship of survivors. The truth about the money was out. The truth about Tiffany was out. There were no more secrets between us. So Marcus said, looking around the empty hall, You really own the building downtown, I do. And the mortgage on my house, I bought it 3 months ago when you missed a payment, I admitted. I didn't want the bank to hassle you." Marcus shook his head, a look of wonder on his face. "You are a sly old fox, Pops." "I learned from the best," I said. "My father, your grandfather, he always said, 'Walk softly, but carry a big checkbook.'" Marcus laughed again. It was a healing sound. "Come on," I said. "Let's go home. Not to this drafty barn. To my house. The one on the south side. The one with the roses. It is small, but it is warm. And I have a bottle of bourbon in the cabinet that is older than you are." "That sounds perfect," Marcus said. We walked out of the banquet hall. I left the half-empty glass of scotch on the bar. I didn't need it. I had the intoxication of truth. We walked to my truck. Marcus didn't head for his luxury SUV. He walked to the passenger side of my old Ford. He climbed in. The seat creaked. The cabin smelled of old coffee and hard work. I started the engine. It roared to life, a steady, reliable rhythm. As we pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the scene of the crime behind us, Marcus looked over at me. "Dad." "Yeah, son. Does this mean I can quit my job and live on a yacht?" I laughed. "Not a chance, kid. You have a company to rebuild. And you owe me for the catering." He smiled. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he looked peaceful. We drove into the night, two rich men in a beat-up truck. We didn't need to show off. We knew who we were. We were Jenkins men, and we were finally truly free. 1 year has passed since the heavy oak doors of the banquet hall slammed shut on the Worthingtons. 1 year since the silence of my house was broken by police sirens instead of Christmas carols. The calendar says it has been 12 months, but it feels like a lifetime ago. I am currently sitting on the deck of a 60-foot Viking yacht, bobbing gently in the turquoise waters off the Florida Keys. The sun is warm on my face, a stark contrast to the freezing garage where I spent that fateful night. I bought this boat 3 months ago. I named her the Betty J after the only woman who ever loved me without a price tag attached. I spend my mornings fishing for marlin and my evenings watching the sun dip below the horizon, listening to the waves slap against the hull. It is a peace I earned. It is a peace I paid for with 40 years of sweat and 3 days of war. As for Tiffany, her view is quite different. My lawyer, Rosen, keeps tabs on her not because I care, but because prudence dictates you always keep an eye on a snake even after you have cut off its head. She is currently serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in state corrections. The woman who once screamed because her lobster bisque was cold now eats cafeteria loaf on a metal tray. The hands that used to grab my credit cards are now calloused from community service. I saw a photo Rosen sent me. She was wearing an orange vest picking up trash along the highway. She looked older, harder. The shine was gone. The gold digger had hit nothing but rock. Her parents, Richard and Karen, didn't fare much better. They filed for bankruptcy 2 months after the wedding disaster. They lost the leased cars, the country club memberships, and the fake friends. They moved into a small rental apartment 2 states away, trying to outrun their reputation. But reputations are like shadows. They grow longer when the sun goes down, and for the Worthingtons it is always night. But the real victory, the only one that truly matters, is back in Atlanta. "I flew back yesterday for a barbecue," Marcus insisted. He finalized the divorce 6 months ago. It was a messy battle, but with the evidence we had, it was a slaughter. He walked away with his company, his dignity, and a hard-earned lesson in human nature. Without the leech draining his accounts, his logistics firm didn't just recover, it soared. He landed a massive government contract last week. He did it on his own merit. He did it with his own team. He didn't need my money to save him. He only needed me to cut the ropes that were holding him down. I walked into the backyard of my house on the south side. It is still my favorite place on earth. The roses I planted for Betty are in full bloom, a riot of red and pink against the wooden fence. The smell of charcoal and hickory smoke filled the air. Marcus was standing by the grill, flipping ribs with the focus of a surgeon. He looked different. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. His shoulders were broad and relaxed. He wasn't the anxious, henpecked husband anymore. He was a man who knew his worth. He saw me coming and grinned. It was a smile that reached his eyes. "Hey, Pops," he called out. "You hungry, starving," I said. I sat down on the patio furniture. It wasn't gold, it wasn't rented. It was sturdy wrought iron that had weathered a dozen storms. Just like us. "How is the boat?" Marcus asked, basting the meat. "She floats," I said. "She is quiet. That is all I need." Marcus laughed. He plated the ribs and brought them over to the table. We sat down, just the two of us, surrounded by the sounds of the neighborhood. A dog barking, kids playing basketball in the alley, Life simple and unpretentious. Marcus reached for a bottle sitting in the center of the table. It was a vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, the same label, the same year as the bottle from Christmas Eve. He caught my eye. He paused. "I trust you, Pops," he said. "I trust you, son," I replied. He poured 2 glasses. The dark red liquid swirled in the crystal. He didn't check it for powder. I didn't check it for sediment. We didn't need to switch glasses. We didn't need to watch each other's hands. He raised his glass. The sunlight caught the wine, turning it into a ruby. "To the truth," Marcus said. "To the truth," I agreed, "and to taking out the trash." We clinked glasses. The sound was crisp and clear, ringing out like a bell. We drank. The wine was rich, complex, and tasted of blackberries and oak. It tasted like freedom. We ate in comfortable silence, wiping barbecue sauce from our lips, enjoying the simple pleasure of a meal shared without pretense. I looked at my son and I felt a swelling in my chest that had nothing to do with money. I had almost lost him. I had almost let him drown in a sea of lies because I was too stubborn to show him the lifeboat. But we made it to shore. The money I have is just paper. The buildings I own are just brick and mortar. But this moment right here, sitting with my boy, safe and sound, knowing that no one was plotting against us, no one was counting our days. This was the real fortune. I wiped my mouth with a napkin. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the sky. It was a good life. It was a hard life, but it was mine. And now, finally, it was ours. Many people mistake silence for weakness and kindness for stupidity. They believe that if you don't flash your wealth or shout your power, you have neither. My daughter-in-law learned the hardest way that the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one barking threats, but the one quietly observing. True power is like an iceberg. What you see is only a fraction of what lies beneath. Family isn't defined by blood or marriage certificates. It is defined by loyalty and respect. When you break that trust for greed, you don't just lose the money, you lose the only people who would have stood by you when the money runs out. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, do you think Tiffany got what she deserved? Or should I have been harsher? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay sharp and protect